Tomorrow, Kyron Arvelt would become king. Tonight he lifted a golden cup to celebrate it. The capital cheered below the palace balcony. Eliana Vare, his bride, smiled at his side. Rhaegar Arvelt, his younger brother, stood near the doors with a crimson cloak over one arm. Kyron drank. The wine tasted sweet, then wrong. His tongue went numb. The balcony bent under his feet, and the cup slipped from his fingers. It broke against the marble. He reached for Eliana. She stepped back. Rhaegar laughed. Eliana laughed after him. Kyron fell to one knee, choking on the poison. Rhaegar told him the kingdom would mourn a dead prince at dawn and kneel to a new king before nightfall. Eliana took the signet ring from Kyron's shaking hand and placed it in Rhaegar's palm. Kyron tried to ask why. Eliana leaned close and said, "You were kind. That is why you were easy to kill." The city kept cheering as Kyron's sight went dark. Cold struck him first. Mud filled his mouth. Kyron's eyes opened beneath a sky the color of old bruises. Rain hit his face in dirty drops. He coughed, rolled onto his side, and vomited black water onto a ground of swamp sludge, bones, dead leaves, and pale fungi. This was not the palace. He pushed himself up, and his arms nearly collapsed under him. They were too thin, too short. Green skin stretched over sharp little bones. Cracked, yellow claws dug into the mud, where human hands should have been. Kyron crawled to a puddle. The reflection staring back was a goblin. Small skull, wide mouth, pointed ears, yellow eyes too large for the face, ribs showing through starved green skin. A body so weak that even standing made it tremble. Pale words appeared in the air before him. New life confirmed. Race, lesser goblin. Rank, F-. Natural traits, none. Current territory, the Deadlands. Survival chance, 0.7%. Kyron stared at the words while hunger twisted through his stomach like a living hook. His mind searched for poison, dream, curse, punishment, anything that could explain this. None of it mattered. The mud was real. The rain was real. The small green hands sinking under his weight were real. More words appeared. Path awakened. Devourer of evolution. Consume the flesh core of stronger beings to steal traits and open new forms. A shape moved between the dead trees. Kyron turned. A goblin twice his size stepped from the mist. It carried a club made from bone and black stone. Its shoulders were thick, its jaw heavy, and its dull eyes were fixed on him with simple hunger. The system displayed new words. Target detected. Goblin warrior, rank F. Possible evolution material. Kyron's new legs shook beneath him. He had no sword, no guards, no royal name that mattered in this swamp. He had only a starving body, a human mind, and a system that did not offer mercy. The goblin warrior raised its club. The prince who had died on marble looked at the creature coming to eat him and understood the first law of his new life. If he wanted to return to the throne room, he would have to crawl there through blood and teeth. He backed away on shaking legs while the goblin warrior charged. The club struck the mud where Kyron's skull had been. Black water burst against his face. He slipped, fell onto his back, and rolled before the second swing came down. The goblin warrior hit hard enough to bury the stone head of the club into the ground. Kyron heard the wet crack of buried bones breaking beneath it. His new body was weak, but it was quick, in a desperate, insect-like way. He scrambled between two roots and tried to stand. His legs shook. His chest burned from panic and hunger. The warrior tore the club free and came after him, snorting through flat nostrils. Kyron had trained with swords since childhood. None of that training fit this body. His balance was wrong. His fingers curled naturally for clawing, not gripping. Even his sight betrayed him, pulling details from the dark swamp that human eyes would have missed, while distorting distance in the mist. The warrior lunged. Kyron ducked under the club and slammed his shoulder into the creature's knee. In his old body, the movement might have broken a man's stance. In this one, it felt like ramming a tree. Pain flashed down his arm. The warrior kicked him in the ribs and sent him sliding through mud. For several seconds, he could not breathe. The system showed nothing useful. No miracle, no weapon, no command to save him. The warrior laughed, a wet barking sound, and advanced. Kyron tasted blood. His blood. Thin, bitter, wrong. The taste sharpened his thoughts. The swamp around him became a battlefield because he forced it to become one. There was a fallen trunk to his left, rotten through the center. A field of pale bone shards behind him. A puddle to the right that bubbled with gas. The warrior was heavy. Its left foot dragged slightly, perhaps from an old wound. It used strength without patience. Kyron crawled backward, making himself look weaker than he was. That required no acting. The warrior followed with the confidence of a creature that had never needed to think. Kyron grabbed a shard of bone from the mud. It was jagged, slick, and too short to be a knife. He hid it beneath his forearm. The warrior raised the club over its head. Kyron threw mud into its eyes. The warrior snarled and swung blind. Kyron did not try to run away. He moved forward, under the arc, and drove the bone shard into the old wound near the creature's knee. The shard sank shallow, then snapped. The warrior howled. Its leg buckled. Not enough to fall, but enough to shift its weight. Kyron bit its ankle. The act revolted the human part of him. Warm, filthy blood filled his mouth. He forced his teeth deeper, tearing skin with weak jaws, then clawed at the same wound with both hands. The warrior slammed the club into his back. Pain exploded through him. He held on. A second blow glanced off his shoulder. The world flashed white. He held on because letting go meant death. The warrior grabbed him by the neck and lifted him. Kyron's feet kicked in empty air. The creature's fingers closed around his throat. It brought him close to its mouth, ready to tear out his face. Kyron used the last broken point of bone still in his fist and stabbed into the warrior's eye. This time, the bone went deep. The warrior screamed and threw him. Kyron hit the rotten trunk. The wood collapsed beneath his weight, opening a hollow full of gray centipedes and black mold. His shoulder burned. His vision doubled. The warrior staggered after him with one eye ruined and one leg bleeding. Kyron reached into the hollow log and pulled out a fistful of centipedes and mold. He did not know if they were poisonous. He only knew the warrior was coming. When it bent to seize him, Kyron shoved the writhing mass into its ruined eye. The warrior went mad. It clawed at its face and stumbled backward. Its dragging foot caught in the root tangle. Kyron saw the moment open. Not victory, a chance. He rose, grabbed the club the warrior had dropped, and tried to lift it. Too heavy. He could not swing it. So he dragged it, both hands wrapped around the handle, and used the ground as leverage. When the warrior fell to one knee, Kyron wedged the stone head of the club against a root, pushed with his shoulder, and levered it into the creature's throat. The warrior choked and thrashed. Kyron climbed onto its back. His claws scraped across the thick neck. He found the wounded eye socket and drove his thumb into it, pushing through warmth and shattered bone until the warrior's body spasmed beneath him. It did not die quickly. The struggle turned the mud red. Kyron lost his grip twice. The warrior nearly crushed him once by rolling onto its side. He tore at its throat with his teeth, not because it was elegant, not because it was heroic, but because teeth were what he had. At last, the creature stopped moving. Rain fell harder. Kyron knelt over the corpse, trembling so violently that his claws clicked against the dead goblin's ribs. His back screamed. His throat fell bruised from the grip. His mouth was full of blood and pieces of flesh. The system appeared. Goblin warrior defeated. Personal contribution confirmed. Flesh core available. Consume to begin trait selection. Kyron stared at the corpse. The human mind recoiled. His stomach answered with a cramp so strong he bent double. Hunger did not care about pride. It did not care about royal blood. His new body wanted meat. He found the heart by instinct more than knowledge. The warrior's ribs resisted his weak hands. He used the jagged bone shard, then the creature's own broken tooth, Then, his claws. The work was slow and disgusting. Several times, he turned his head and gagged. The swamp watched in silence. When he finally tore the heart free, it pulsed once in his hands, though the body was dead. The system's words brightened. Flesh core confirmed. Consume. Kyron remembered Eliana lifting his ring from his finger. He remembered Rygar wearing the cloak. He remembered the city celebrating while he drowned in his own blood. He bit into the heart. The taste was iron, rot, and heat. Power entered him like fever. His back arched. Bones shifted under his skin. He fell sideways and clawed at the mud while something inside his stomach burned through him, searching for places to rebuild. Trait selection available. Option 1, dense muscle fiber. Option 2, hardened knuckles. Option 3, battle reflex of a goblin warrior. Option 4, reinforced digestion from monster flesh. Kyron wanted strength. His broken ribs wanted strength. But the prince in him, the part trained to look beyond the first move, understood the shape of the game. One strong arm would not carry him through the Deadlands. A better stomach could turn every future corpse into a weapon. He selected reinforced digestion. Pain rolled through him again. His belly tightened. His teeth lengthened slightly. A sour heat settled beneath his ribs. Not painful now, but active, like a furnace just lit. Secondary minor change, granted due to first evolution consumption. Claws sharpened. Kyron flexed his fingers. The cracked yellow nails had darkened and curved. Not enough to make him strong, but enough to tear skin. He dragged the dead warrior into the hollow log before other scavengers came. Then he ate what he could. He hated every bite, until hatred became useless. He ate because he wanted to live. He ate because the poison had stolen his human body, and the swamp would take this one too if he clung to manners made for banquet halls. By dawn, the corpse was half stripped. Kyron crouched beneath the log, wrapped in the dead warrior's bone necklace. The rain had washed blood from his face, but not from his hands. Mist curled over the swamp. In the distance, other goblins called to one another. He looked at the pale text still floating at the edge of his sight. Current race. Lesser goblin. Rank F-. Acquired trait. Reinforced digestion. Acquired minor trait. Sharpened claws. Evolution progress 1%. Kyron closed his fingers around the necklace bones until they cracked. 1%. That was not hope. Hope was too soft a word for what moved in him. It was direction. Kyron learned the Deadlands by bleeding across them. The swamp did not allow clean lessons. The first blue mushrooms he ate made his tongue swell until he could barely breathe. A stream that looked clear left worms under the skin of his wrist, and he had to burn them out with a coal stolen from a lightning-struck tree. A pale rabbit with no eyes nearly killed him because its hind legs were strong enough to crack bone. By the end of his 7th day, he understood that weakness was not a condition in the Deadlands. It was an invitation. He stopped walking like a man trapped in a goblin body. He began moving like the body wanted to move. Low to the ground, feet turned outward for mud, hands ready to catch roots, nose lifted when the wind changed. Shame had no use in a swamp that wanted him dead. Hunger remained his constant teacher. Small kills gave little. Mud leeches, blind rabbits, corpse beetles, and bone frogs filled his stomach and kept his digestion burning. But the system rarely reacted. Only creatures with a true flesh core mattered. He found one inside a black rat the size of a dog after 3 hours of stalking it through reed beds. The rat was faster. Kyron had made the mistake of attacking from open ground, and it tore a strip from his thigh before he escaped into a root hollow. He waited there, pressing mud into the wound, while the rat circled and hissed. A prince would have cursed the indignity. Kyron listened to the creature's pattern instead. It always approached from the side, where the wind carried blood. He broke a rib from an old carcass, wedged it under the mud with a sharp end angled up, then dragged his wounded leg across the clearing to lay a trail. When the rat charged, he rolled aside. Its own speed drove the rib through its throat. Even then, it fought hard. It thrashed so violently that the bones snapped. and Kyron had to pin its head under both knees while clawing through its chest. The system offered him 3 options: improved sense of smell, quick tendon response, disease resistance. He chose quick tendon response. Speed kept him alive better than comfort. The change made his legs cramp for an entire night. By morning, he could spring twice as far from a crouch. On the 10th day, another goblin found him. She was crouched on a branch above his shelter, watching him with yellow eyes narrowed under a hood made of stitched rat hide. She was small, though not as thin as he had been on the first day. A bone knife rested against her knee. Her skin was a dull gray-green, better for shadows than his brighter color. Kyron smelled her before he saw her. He did not look up at once. Instead, he continued scraping meat from a rabbit's skull with a claw, while shifting his weight closer to the sharpened stick hidden under leaves. The goblin girl clicked her tongue. She spoke in the harsh goblin dialect, and Kyron understood only half of it. The system did not translate. He had been learning by listening from a distance, matching sounds to actions and threats. She called him a strange runt and asked why he ate alone. Kyron answered slowly, using the few words he knew. Alone meant quiet. Quiet meant alive. The answer made her grin. One of her teeth was missing. Her name was Mira, though she did not give it until 2 days later. At first, she followed him at a distance, curious the way a crow is curious about a wounded animal that has not died yet. She belonged to the Thorn Den, a weak goblin group under the rule of Grak, the warrior whose scouts Kyron had killed on his first night. Grak's den survived by stealing, scavenging, and surrendering its weakest members whenever human hunters came to trade rusted blades for living bodies. Kyron understood more than her words. He understood the way she checked the sky before speaking of hunters. He understood how her mouth tightened when she mentioned Grak. He understood the old habit of a subject who hated a ruler but had never seen a path beyond obedience. Mira began helping him for reasons she did not admit. She showed him which mushrooms burned the throat but cured fever, which pools held leeches, and which trees were marked by the scent of larger predators. In return, Kyron shared meat and taught her better traps. He did not tell her he had been human. Not because she would fail to believe him, though she probably would, but because the truth had no value yet. A dead prince could not help her. A clever goblin might. Their first real test came when 3 Thornden goblins cornered them near a field of white reeds. The leader had a spear made from a sharpened fence post. The other 2 carried stones. They had seen Mira sharing food and decided Kyron's hidden shelter must hold more. Mira wanted to run. Kyron stopped her with a hand signal. Running would lead them into open mud where the spear mattered. Fighting where they stood would favor numbers. So Kyron stepped back into the reeds and let the stalks swallow him. The leader mocked him and followed. Kyron had already cut the bases of several reeds and angled them under the water like stakes. The first goblin stepped wrong and drove one through his foot. He screamed and dropped the spear. The second rushed past him. Mira sprang from the side and slashed the tendons behind his knee. She was quick, but fear made her retreat too soon. The wounded goblin swung a stone and caught her shoulder. Kyron used that moment. He came low, claws out, and tore into the goblin's throat. Enough to blind him with panic. The third goblin ran. Kyron chased him for 6 strides, then stopped. Chasing into unknown reeds would be stupidity. He returned to the 2 on the ground. The leader begged in the broken way of goblins, offering bones, secrets, anything. Kyron listened until he heard what mattered. Grak had human metal. Grak had a den under a fallen tower. Grak sold runts when food ran low. Human hunters would return after the next red moon. Kyron killed the leader quickly. Mira watched him consume the flesh core. Her nose wrinkled, but she did not turn away. The system offered a minor improvement to grip strength, a crude spear instinct, or thicker skin along the forearms. Kyron chose the spear instinct. He had tools now. He needed his body to understand them. That night, Mira sat across from him under a slanted rock, while rain tapped overhead. Her injured shoulder was wrapped in moss. She asked, in the careful words they now shared, why he chose strange things. Strong goblins always chose bigger arms, harder fists, heavier skulls. Kyron sharpened the stolen spear with a piece of stone. He told her that big arms only solved the enemy in front of you. A better choice solved tomorrow. Mira thought about that for a long time. By morning, she had stopped calling him Runt. She called him Kyron instead. The name felt dangerous in her mouth. He had almost given a false one, but something in him refused to bury the last piece of himself in the mud. Kyron was the name Eliana had betrayed. Kyron would be the name that returned. Over the following weeks, Mira brought him information from Thornden. Grak was bigger than most goblins, scarred across the chest, one tusk broken, with a habit of crushing skulls when bored. He kept 2 bodyguards near him and slept in a chamber made from the base of an old watchtower. A narrow chimney vented smoke from his fire pit. A tunnel behind the chamber led to a refuse slope. Kyron asked about the human hunters. Mira spat into the mud. They came in iron masks and leather coats. They brought chains sized for goblin necks. Grak always gave them the smallest first. Kyron listened without interrupting. His claws carved lines into the branch beneath his hands. He had known human cruelty as policy. He had signed reports about border trade, monster containment, and regulated harvests of dangerous species. The words had been clean in ink. Here they had faces. Small faces with pointed ears, thin wrists with old chain scars. For the first time since waking in the swamp, Kyron's revenge shifted its weight. Eliana and Rhaegar remained at the center of it, bright as knives. But the road to them now passed through every smaller tyrant who fed the rot. Grak would be the first. The Thorn Den was built inside the corpse of an old human tower. Only the lower stones remained, swallowed by roots and black moss. The upper floors had collapsed generations ago, forming a jagged hill of rubble with tunnels clawed between fallen blocks. The smell reached Kyron before the den came into view. Goblin sweat, old meat, damp ash, and fear. He watched from a ridge of dead fern while Mira pointed out entrances. The largest tunnel faced the marsh path. Grak's warriors used it to drag in kills. A smaller crack opened near the roots on the eastern side. Children used it when adults were not watching. The refuse slope lay behind the tower, a slick run of bones, waste, and broken shells that drained into a shallow ditch. Kyron studied the shape of the place for 3 nights. A direct attack would fail. Grak had more bodies, and bodies mattered in narrow tunnels. Poison could help, but not enough. Fire would smoke the den and kill the weak along with the strong. Kyron did not care about mercy in the abstract. He cared about useful survivors. A ruler needed people. A future army could not be built from ashes, so he chose humiliation before death. Grak ruled by fear. To kill him in darkness might make another brute take his place. To break him where the den could see would make the den available. The red moon rose on the 4th night, large and dull behind clouds. Human hunters came with it. There were 6 of them, moving along the marsh path with lanterns covered in red glass. Their boots were treated with oil against rot. Iron masks hid their faces. Chains clinked at their belts. One led a mule with cages folded on its back. Kyron crouched above the path with Mira and 3 goblins who had agreed to help only after seeing meat and a plan. They were thin, nervous creatures, more likely to run than fight. Kyron had expected that. He had not asked them to fight. He asked them to make noise. When the hunters reached the narrowest part of the path, the goblins began shrieking from the left side of the marsh. They threw stones and vanished between reeds. The hunters turned with practiced annoyance, not alarm. 2 lifted crossbows. One laughed and said the little ones were eager tonight. Kyron waited until their formation stretched. Then he cut the vine. A dead tree, half sawed through over 2 nights, crashed across the path behind the last hunter and struck the mule. The animal screamed and went down, cages spilling into the mud. The hunters turned again, now confused. Mira dropped from a branch onto the rear hunter's back. She did not try to kill him. She cut the strap holding his mask. Kyron had learned from the first goblin warrior that eyes were honest targets. The mask fell. Kyron threw a pouch of crushed fire nettle into the man's face. The hunter screamed and clawed at his eyes. Chaos broke the formation. That was all Kyron needed. He moved through the mud behind them, stabbing low with the stolen spear. Armor guarded chests. He struck calves, ankles, the soft backs of knees. A crossbow bolt hissed past his ear. Another hit one of the noisy goblins in the throat. The goblin fell without a sound. Kyron did not stop for him. One hunter swung a cleaver and nearly split Mira from shoulder to hip. She twisted away, but the blade opened her side. Kyron felt the old princely instinct to rush to her. He crushed it. Saving her by dying would save nothing. He drove the spear into the hunter's boot, pinning his foot to a buried root. The man cursed and raised the cleaver. Kyron abandoned the spear, sprang onto the man's chest, and hooked his claws under the lower edge of the iron mask. The hunter grabbed him by the back and squeezed hard enough to make his ribs creak. Kyron bit the exposed throat beneath the mask. He tore sideways, not deep, then jammed 2 fingers into the wound and pulled. The hunter dropped. Kyron hit the mud beside him and rolled under another swing. He was hurt. One rib had cracked. His left hand had gone numb. He crawled beneath the fallen mule as 2 hunters tried to circle him. A hoof struck one hunter's knee with a wet crunch. Mira, bleeding from the side, used the moment to drag a chain around the injured man's neck from behind. She lacked the strength to choke him quickly. Kyron grabbed the other end and pulled with her. The hunter thrashed, trying to reach his knife. His fingers brushed the handle. Kyron saw it and kicked mud into his hand. Mira shifted the chain higher. Together they pulled until the hunters stopped moving. The remaining 3 hunters retreated toward the den, shouting for Grek. That was part of the plan. Kyron let them run. By the time he reached the tower, the den was awake. Goblins crowded the tunnels, eyes reflecting firelight. Grek stood near the main entrance, larger than Kyron had expected. He wore a human breastplate strapped badly across his chest, and held a thick iron mace that must have been stolen from a soldier. His bodyguards flanked him, both strong, both armed. The 3 surviving hunters shouted over one another. They blamed the ambush on wild runts. They demanded repayment. Grek snarled at them, then at the den, then at Mira when he saw her beside Kyron. Mira stiffened. Kyron walked forward with the dead hunter's iron mask in one hand. Every goblin saw him. That mattered. He had mud on his body, blood on his mouth, and a chain wrapped around one forearm. He was still smaller than Grek's bodyguards, but he did not move like prey. Grek laughed and called him a corpse that forgot to fall down. Kyron answered in goblin words loud enough for the den. He said Grek fed children to humans and called it leadership. The den went quiet. Grek moved first. His mace came down in a diagonal smash meant to break Kyron from shoulder to hip. Kyron had no intention of meeting it. He rolled under the swing and slashed at Grek's thigh. The human breastplate did nothing for legs. His claws opened skin, but the cut was shallow. Kyron slammed into a stone and felt the cracked rib shift. Pain stole his breath. A bodyguard rushed in. Mira intercepted, not to win, but to slow. She threw a hunter's chain at the guard's face. The guard tore it away. Kyron used that heartbeat to drag himself through a side crack between stones. Grek roared and followed. His size forced him to turn sideways. Kyron had chosen this crack 2 nights earlier. Inside, the passage narrowed and dipped. He had lined the floor with broken shells and sharpened bone, then covered them with wet moss. Grek stepped in hard and drove 6 points into his foot. He bellowed. The sound shook dirt from the stones. Kyron attacked the injured foot. Grek swung the mace one-handed and smashed the wall instead, showering them both with chips of stone. One cut Kyron's cheek. Another struck his ear and filled the world with ringing. He could not stay close. Grek was too strong. Even wounded, one clean hit would end him. He retreated deeper into the crack. Grek followed, pride dragging him where sense would not. Kyron led him to the old smoke chimney, a vertical shaft too narrow for Grak's shoulders, but wide enough for Kyron to climb. He scrambled up, claws biting into root and stone. Grak stabbed upward with the mace, scraping Kyron's leg. The pain nearly made him fall. At the top of the shaft, Kyron reached the fire pit chamber behind Grak's sleeping room. He had hidden a clay pot there earlier, sealed with wax made from swamp resin. Inside was gas from the bubbling pools, trapped in bladder skins and mixed with dried fire moss. It was not a bomb in any refined sense. It was a desperate swamp trick. Kyron shoved the pot into the shaft and dropped a coal after it. The blast was small but vicious in the enclosed space. Fire roared down the chimney. Grak's scream followed. Kyron fell backward, singed across the arms. Smoke filled the chamber. The den erupted outside. Grak staggered out of the crack with his face burned and one eye swollen shut. Still alive, still dangerous. Kyron had counted on pain, not death. The bodyguards tried to reach their chief. Mira and the other rebels struck from behind. One rebel died immediately, skull crushed against stone. The other managed to hamstring a guard before being gutted. Mira fought like a cornered animal, slipping under arms, cutting wrists, using teeth when her knife was knocked away. Kyron picked up the iron mask from the ground, hooked its strap around his hand, and faced Grak in the open. Grak's burned eye leaked. His injured foot dragged. The mace still looked enormous. He charged. Kyron ran toward him, then dropped flat in the mud at the last moment. Grak's mace passed over him. Kyron slid between his legs, hooked the mask strap around Grak's wounded ankle, and pulled with both hands. The move did not topple him. It made him stumble. Mira saw the opening. She threw the chain. It looped around Grak's neck from the side. 3 goblins from the den, perhaps moved by courage, perhaps by the sight of their tyrant bleeding, grabbed the chain and pulled. Grak swung wildly. One goblin flew into the wall, another lost fingers. Kyron climbed Grak's back. The burned skin gave his claws purchase. Grak reached for him, but the chain kept his head tilted. Kyron bit into the side of his neck. Grak slammed backward into stone. Kyron's shoulder nearly dislocated. He bit deeper. His claws found the gap under the breastplate and tore upward. Grak fell to one knee. The den watched its ruler choking in the mud. Kyron released the neck long enough to seize the broken bone knife from Mira's belt. He drove it into Grak's good eye. Grak's body convulsed. The mace fell. His hands clawed at nothing. When he collapsed, the ground seemed to sigh beneath him. No one cheered. Kyron cut open the chest in front of them all. He tore out the heart while it still steamed. The den recoiled, but they did not look away. He ate. Each bite a declaration more powerful than speech. The system opened. Flesh core consumed. Dominant goblin blood detected. Evolution available. Option 1. Goblin Brute. Increase size and strength. Option 2. Goblin Hunter. Increase speed, stealth, and senses. Option 3. Hobgoblin Bloodkin. Increase command presence, body structure, and growth ceiling. Kyron chose the third. The change drove him to his knees. His bones stretched. His spine straightened. Muscle crawled over his limbs in hot waves. His jaw reshaped. His fingers lengthened. Black markings appeared across his shoulders, like scars drawn under the skin. When the pain ended, he stood taller than every goblin except the largest dead ones. Still not human. Not even close. But no longer a runt. Current race: Hobgoblin Bloodkin. Rank: E. Acquired trait: Blood Command. The goblins of Thorn Den lowered their eyes. Kyron looked toward the marsh path, where the human hunters had come with chains. Then he looked to the west, beyond the Deadlands, where Arvenia waited behind roads, walls, and lies. Eliana, Rygar. He did not speak their names aloud. The den was not ready to understand them. Instead, he gave his first order. No more children would be sold. Power did not make Thorn Den loyal. It made the den quiet. For 3 days after Grak died, no goblin challenged Kyron openly. They watched him from the corners of huts and from behind thorn fences. They stared at his taller body, at the dark marks that had appeared across his shoulders, and at the place where Grak's skull had been fixed above the central fire. Kyron understood their fear. He had once watched nobles behave the same way after a king changed a minister. Everyone bowed. Everyone waited to see who would be punished first. He did not punish at random. He walked through the den with Mira at his side and counted what Grak had left behind. There were 27 grown goblins, 11 half-grown young, 6 children, 3 bone knives, 2 cracked spears, 1 iron hatchet from human trade, and enough dried rat meat to feed the den for 4 days. Grak had ruled a starving pit and called it a tribe. The first thing Kyron changed was food. Hunters would eat first, only if they brought food back. Children would be fed every night. Anyone who stole from the children would lose a finger for the first theft and a hand for the second. The goblins listened with blank faces. Laws were not common in Thornden. Grak had called his moods law. A thick-armed goblin named Drell spat near Kyron's foot. He asked why strong hunters should feed weak mouths. He said Grak had been cruel, but at least Grak understood that useless bodies slowed the den. Kyron did not answer at once. He took the iron hatchet from the pile and handed it to Drell. Then he told Drell to strike him. The den shifted. Mira's hand moved toward her knife, but Kyron raised one finger and she stopped. Drell hesitated for only a breath. He swung the hatchet at Kyron's head with the heavy confidence of a creature used to bullying smaller bodies. Kyron stepped inside the ark. His new hobgoblin body moved faster than Drell expected, but not fast enough to avoid the edge completely. The hatchet cut across Kyron's shoulder, opening skin and drawing dark blood. Pain flashed down his arm. His grip weakened for half a second. Drell saw it and lunged again. Kyron let him come. He twisted his left foot into the mud, lowered his weight, and struck Drell in the throat with 2 knuckles. Drell gagged. Kyron caught the wrist holding the hatchet and drove his knee into Drell's ribs. Bone cracked. Drell tried to bite, so Kyron slammed him face first into the packed earth. The fight was ugly. Drell was heavier than he looked, and panic gave him strength. He clawed Kyron's leg and nearly tore free. Kyron drove his thumb into Drell's wounded throat and held him down until the goblin's struggling turned weak. He did not kill him. He made Drell kneel in front of the children whose food he had mocked. Then he took one finger from Drell's left hand with the iron hatchet. The den learned the shape of the first law. That night, Kyron led the hunters out himself. He did not trust them to obey until he proved that obedience brought meat. They moved through the reed beds north of Thornden, where pale bone wolves hunted in packs. The wolves were larger than normal dogs, thin as famine, with jaws strong enough to crush goblin skulls. Kyron did not charge them. He watched their pattern for an hour. The pack sent 2 wolves ahead to flush prey, and kept 3 hidden near the sides. Grak would have rushed with shouting bodies and lost half his hunters. Kyron placed goblins in the trees with stones and ordered Mira to drag bloody rat guts through a narrow channel between 2 sink pits. The wolves came silent at first. Then one raised its nose and padded into the channel. Another followed. The side wolves moved along the reeds, just as Kyron had expected. The first mistake came from a young goblin in the tree. His hand shook. He dropped his stone too early, striking mud instead of the wolf's skull. The pack scattered. One wolf leaped into the reeds and took the young goblin by the ankle, pulling him from the branch. The formation broke. Kyron cursed under his breath and ran. He did not run to the fallen goblin. He ran to the narrowest point of the channel and slashed his own forearm. Blood spilled warm and sharp into the air. The wolves turned. They wanted the stronger meat. Kyron backed toward the left sink pit. The first wolf sprang. He ducked low, let its claws rake his back, and shoved both hands into its ribs as it passed. His sharpened claws did not kill it, but they opened it enough to slow the landing. Mira dropped from a branch and drove a spear through its hind leg. The second wolf went for her. Kyron threw himself into its side. The impact drove the breath from him, and the wolf's teeth closed on his shoulder. It shook him hard enough to blur the world. He pushed his forearm deeper into its mouth before it could bite through his neck. Teeth scraped bone. His other hand found its eye. He dug in. The wolf released him with a howl and stumbled into the sink pit. Mud swallowed its legs. The other goblins found their courage then. Stones fell. Spears jabbed. One wolf escaped. 3 died. The young goblin lived, though his ankle would never move cleanly again. Kyron ate the heart of the pack leader while the den watched. Bone Wolf defeated. Personal contribution confirmed. Trait selection available. He considered stronger jaws, faster sprinting, and bone-crushing bite. Then he chose the one trait Grak would never have understood: pack coordination instinct. The next morning, he knew how to make a hunting party move as one body. Not perfectly, not like trained soldiers. But when he raised his hand, the goblins understood pressure, spacing, and pursuit more quickly than before. The trait did not replace teaching. It made teaching possible. By the end of the first month, Thornden no longer smelled only of rot. Craig had not yet arrived. No walls had risen. No kingdom existed. But the den had watch posts, food pits, and 2 escape tunnels covered with reeds. Kyron kept Grak's skull above the fire until every goblin child knew what it meant. A ruler who sold his own would become a warning. On the 31st night, Mira found Kyron sitting outside the den, staring west. She asked why he cared so much about laws. Goblins followed strength. That was enough for most tribes. Kyron looked at his clawed hands. The wounds from the wolf had closed into hard scars. He told her that strength without law always became hunger with a crown. Mira did not understand the words fully, but she understood the way he said them. Someone had worn that crown over him once. She sat beside him and kept watch until dawn. The Black Stone Ridge lay 2 days east of Thornden. Goblins avoided it because the ground trembled there at night, and because smoke sometimes leaked from cracks in the rock. Mira claimed spirits lived beneath it. Drell, now missing a finger and more obedient than before, said trolls had taken the old tunnels. Kyron believed the second answer. He found the entrance at sunset. It was hidden behind hanging roots and old bones, but not hidden well enough. Small claw marks covered the stone. They were too neat for goblins, too shallow for trolls, kobolds. Kyron had read about them as a prince. Human scholars described kobolds as cowardly pests who stole ore and worshipped anything larger than themselves. Those same scholars had never crawled through a living mine with only a bone knife and 6 frightened goblins behind them. The tunnel smelled of iron, wet clay, and sickness. They found the first kobold chained to a cart rail. He was small, lizard-like, with gray scales and a broken tail. When he saw Kyron, he tried to hide behind his own chains. Mira whispered that the creature was useless. Kyron saw the cart, the chipped ore, the tool marks, and the pattern of supports holding the tunnel ceiling. Useless creatures did not keep mines from collapsing. He crouched and asked who had done this. The kobolds stared at him. He was more afraid of the darkness behind the tunnel than of the hobgoblin before him. At last he pointed downward and spoke a name in a cracked voice. Mugor. Mugor was a cave troll. He had taken the lower caverns and forced the kobolds to dig for iron nodules. Trolls did not need iron, but human traders did. Kyron felt the old anger stir in his chest. Another monster, selling weaker monsters for scraps from human hands. He freed the kobold and learned his name. Craig. Craig spoke quickly once fear loosened its grip. There were 40 kobolds in the mine. 17 could still work. 6 were children. Mugor slept in the heat vent chamber and kept 2 smaller trolls near the water shaft. The trolls healed quickly from ordinary wounds. Fire hurt them, but fire also filled the tunnels with smoke and killed kobolds first. Kyron listened. A direct attack would fail. His own strength had grown, but not enough to wrestle a troll underground. He asked Craig what the tunnels breathed through. The kobold blinked. Then his eyes sharpened. There were 3 vents, 2 narrow, 1 wide. If the wide vent was blocked, smoke from the heat chamber would push down instead of up. If the water shaft was opened at the right time, steam would blind the trolls. Kyron smiled. The plan took all night. Mira led 2 goblins to the upper vent and packed it with wet hides and clay. Craig guided Kyron through a maintenance crawl, barely wide enough for his shoulders. Drell, eager to prove his missing finger had taught him something, waited near the water shaft with a stone wedge. The first part worked. The wide vent choked. Smoke rolled back into the heat chamber. The smaller trolls woke, coughing and angry. One stumbled toward the water shaft, just as Kyron wanted. Then Drell slipped. The wedge fell too soon. Water burst from the shaft in a violent sheet, hitting hot stone before both smaller trolls reached the chamber. Steam filled the tunnel, but only one troll was caught in the worst of it. The other charged blind through the white vapor and slammed into the goblin line. A goblin died under its foot. Another was thrown into a wall. Kyron left the crawl before he reached his planned position. He hit the troll from the side with a mining pick taken from a kobold cart. The pick sank into thick hide and stopped in muscle. The troll roared and backhanded him across the tunnel. Stone struck Kyron's spine. For a moment, his legs refused to answer. The troll came low, using its arms like a bear. Its wounds smoked, already closing. Kyron forced himself up and grabbed a hanging chain. When the troll lunged, he swung across its path and kicked the pick handle with both feet. The embedded metal twisted. The troll's side tore open. It still did not die. Mira appeared above it on a support beam and dropped a bag of powdered ore into its face. The dust blinded it long enough for Kyron to drive a sharpened rail through its open side. He pushed until the rail pinned the troll to a wooden brace. The creature thrashed so violently that the ceiling groaned. Craig screamed that the brace would break. Kyron grabbed the troll's jaw with both hands and forced its head back. His claws scraped over bone. He bit into the thick, pulsing flesh under the throat and tore until hot blood filled his mouth. The troll's regeneration fought him. He kept tearing. When the smaller troll finally died, Mugor arrived. The cave troll filled the tunnel from wall to wall. His skin was gray stone, his shoulders hunched with mineral growths, and one eye had been replaced by a chunk of yellow crystal. He carried a hammer made from a broken support pillar. Kyron knew at once that he could not win in the tunnel. He retreated. Mugor followed, crushing carts, chains, and bodies underfoot. Kyron let him see weakness. He limped. He dragged one arm. He let blood mark the path. Rage made the troll careless. The path led to the old ore chamber. Craig had described it as a dead room. Mined out long ago, its ceiling was held by 4 cracked pillars. Kyron had ordered the kobolds to weaken too, while the fight began. He had planned to lure a smaller troll there, not Mugor. Now, the larger prize was coming. Kyron entered the chamber and turned. Mugor swung the pillar hammer. Kyron rolled beneath it, but the shock of the impact threw him across the floor. His ribs screamed. The troll advanced. Kyron threw stones at the crystal eye. Mugor protected it, learning faster than Kyron liked. The first pillar fell when Mira cut the rope tied to its cracked base. The ceiling shifted. Dust rained down. Mugor understood too late. He charged toward the exit, not toward Kyron. That was the mistake of a ruler who cared only for his own survival. Kyron threw himself at the troll's knee and drove both claws into the joint. Mugor kicked him off, but the delay cost him 3 steps. The second pillar fell. The ceiling came down in slabs. Kyron was not clear of it. A stone plate struck his back and drove him to the floor. His vision went white. His lungs emptied. Somewhere ahead, Mugor roared as half the chamber collapsed over him. Kyron crawled by instinct. His fingers found broken rock, then mud, then Mira's wrist. She and Drell pulled him into the tunnel as the last stones fell. Mugor was buried from the waist down, still alive. Kyron rose with blood running from his nose and mouth. He took the iron hatchet from Drell and walked to the trapped troll. Mugor snapped at him. Kyron waited for each bite to miss, then chopped into the exposed throat. It took 9 blows. By the 6th, his arms shook. By the 9th, the troll stopped moving. He ate the crystalline heart, while Craig and the freed kobolds watched from the tunnel. Cave troll defeated. Personal contribution confirmed. Trait selection available. The system offered regeneration first. Kyron almost chose it. Then a warning pulsed beneath the option. Current vessel unstable. Full troll regeneration may cause flesh swelling and loss of fine motor control. He chose stone skin patches instead. Defensive growths that could harden selected parts of his body for short bursts. The next day, the kobolds swore service. Not with grand words. They brought him tools, ore maps, and the names of every tunnel that still held air. Craig showed Kyron a cavern under the ridge where roots from dead black trees pierced the ceiling. Water dripped there. Smoke rose through hidden vents. Stone could be cut into walls. Iron could be worked. Kyron stood in the center of the cavern and saw more than a mine. He saw foundations. Thornden would remain a den. This place would become something else. Craig asked what it should be called. Kyron touched the black root hanging near his shoulder. Black Root Hold. Black Root Hold changed the Deadlands faster than Kyron expected. Kobolds dug drainage channels. Goblins dragged thorn fences down from the old den and rebuilt them around the ridge. Mira trained scouts to mark safe paths through the marsh. Kyron led hunts and returned with flesh, bones, and lessons. A month later, there were 14 of them, all broad-shouldered and scarred, with gray-green skin and heavy axes made from stolen iron. Their leader wore a necklace of broken tusks. His name was Borg Kostalam, though at the time he announced himself only as the one who would take the hold. He did not attack at once. That made Kyron respect him more than most brutes. Borg studied the new walls, the watch holes, the goblins with spears, and the kobold murder slits cut into the rock. Then he demanded tribute, meat, ore, and 3 workers. In return, he would allow the weak creatures of Blackroot to live under orc protection. Kyron came out alone. Borg laughed when he saw him. Kyron was taller now, stronger than any goblin Borg had known, but he was still smaller than an orc. The orc leader asked if the den had sent its green prince to beg. The word prince tightened something in Kyron's chest. He told Borg that Blackroot did not pay tribute. Borg offered a duel. Mira hated the idea. She knew Kyron's strength, but she also knew orcs. In a clean contest of weight and reach, Borg would break him. Craig whispered that the hold had boiling water, stone drops, and 3 traps ready at the gate. Kyron refused them. A ruler could use traps on enemies. A ruler could not build loyalty from behind walls forever. The duel took place on the frozen mud flat below the ridge. The cold season had hardened the upper layer of marsh, but dark water still moved under it. Kyron chose the ground. Borg did not notice why. The first exchange nearly ended the duel. Borg's axe came down with a force that split the mud crust where Kyron had stood. Kyron dodged right and struck at the ribs. Stone skin hardened across his knuckles at the last moment. The blow landed, but Borg's body was packed with muscle. He grunted, turned, and slammed his elbow into Kyron's jaw. Kyron hit the ground and tasted blood. The orcs cheered. Goblins fell silent. Borg did not rush. He waited with his axe high, forcing Kyron to stand into danger. Kyron understood then that Borg was not stupid. He was experienced. He had survived by letting smaller enemies waste themselves. Kyron changed pace. He circled, staying just beyond the axe head. Borg cut at his legs. Kyron jumped back, felt the blade slice his shin, and answered with a handful of mud thrown into Borg's face. The orc blinked once. Not enough. Borg charged through it and caught Kyron by the shoulder. The grip was crushing. Kyron hardened the skin under Borg's fingers, but the pressure still drove pain deep into the joint. Borg lifted him and slammed him into the ground. The ice cracked beneath Kyron's back. There, Kyron had chosen the ground because of the water below. He needed Borg's weight in the wrong place. He kicked at Borg's knee. The orc shifted. Kyron clawed Borg's forearm, drawing blood, then bit into the hand holding him. Borg snarled and threw him aside. Kyron landed badly, rolled, and came up near the thinnest patch of crust. He let his left leg drag, as if injured worse than it was. Borg saw weakness and came hard. His first step cracked the ice. His second sank to the ankle. He recovered quickly, too quickly. He widened his stance and swung, forcing Kyron to retreat. Kyron could not simply wait. The orc would step free. Mira had once told him bone wolves committed fully when blood was visible. Orcs, he now learned, committed when victory felt near. Kyron turned his back for half a breath. Borg roared and lunged. Kyron dropped flat. The axe passed over his head. Borg's full weight landed on the weak patch. The crust broke. One leg plunged into black water to the thigh. Kyron moved before the orc could tear free. He drove a sharpened bone spike through Borg's trapped foot and into the mud below. Then he struck the axe wrist with stone-hardened knuckles. Once, twice. The third blow broke something. Borg punched him with his free hand. Kyron's cheek split. He nearly lost consciousness. He clung to the orc's arm and used the weight of his own body to twist the broken wrist. The axe fell. Borg could still have killed him. He tried. He grabbed Kyron's throat and squeezed until the sky narrowed. Kyron did not try to pry the hand away. He drove both thumbs into the wound he had opened in Borg's forearm and tore sideways. The grip weakened. Kyron put the iron hatchet under Borg's chin. The orc stopped. Kyron could have killed him. The system would have rewarded him. Orc strength would have been useful. Instead, he asked Borg whether he wanted to die as a raider or live as a general. Borg looked at the hatchet, at his trapped leg, at the walls of Blackroot Hold, and finally, at the goblins who had not run. He lowered his eyes. The orcs entered Blackroot Hold before sunset. They did not become gentle. They broke tools, frightened kobolds, and ate like wolves. Kyron assigned Mira to watch them, and Craig to count every missing nail. On the third day, an orc struck a kobold for moving too slowly. Kyron broke the orc's arm in front of Borg. Borg did not interfere. After that, the orcs learned the second law. Strength gave responsibility before privilege. Weeks passed. The hold grew. The first forge smoked. The first proper spearheads cooled in water. Scouts brought news of human patrols on the western road. Kyron waited. He needed more than spears before he touched Arvenia. A hunter came back burned from shoulder to hip and died before dawn. Another babbled of a lizard made of flame sleeping in the old sulfur pits. Craig said the pits fed the forge vents. If the creature nested there, Blackroot Hold could lose its heat and smoke channels. Borg suggested charging it with wet hides and axes. Mira called that a good way to cook orcs. Kyron listened to the report, then asked how hot the creature's blood burned. No one knew. He smiled slightly. The sulfur pits glowed at night like wounds under the earth. Kyron took 12 fighters, 4 goblin spear carriers, 3 kobolds with hook chains, 2 orcs carrying wet hide shields, Mira, Borg, and himself. Craig came against Kyron's orders because he knew the old vent channels, and because, in his own trembling words, someone had to stop brave idiots from standing where the ground would explode. The fire salamander was larger than a horse and lower to the ground. Its body was plated in red-black scales. Heat shimmered around it, bending the air. Each breath pushed sparks from the slits along its throat. It slept curled around a pool of molten sulfur. Kyron's first plan was simple, because complicated plans died quickly in heat. The kobolds would open 2 drainage cuts and release cold marsh water into the outer pit. Steam would blind the salamander. The orcs would hold wet hide shields to draw its charge. Goblins would drive hooked spears into the soft joints behind its forelegs. Kyron would aim for the glowing gland beneath its throat. The plan lasted less than a minute. When the water hit the pit, The salamander did not wake confused. It woke furious. Its tail lashed through the steam and broke one kobold's spine against a rock. Then, it breathed a fan of fire into the left drainage cut. The water flashed into scalding vapor that rolled over the goblin line. Two goblins dropped their spears and screamed. The salamander charged the sound. Borg met it with a wet hide shield. The impact drove him back 5 steps. The hide smoked. The orc's boots dug trenches in the ash. Kyron came from the side and struck the throat with a stone-hardened fist. The scales there were softer, but not soft enough. His knuckles cracked. Heat bit into his skin. The salamander snapped at him. He threw himself backward. Teeth closed on empty air, but the heat of its mouth blistered his face. Mira darted in and stabbed behind its leg. Her spear point found a joint. The creature jerked, crushing the shaft against the ground and nearly taking her with it. Kyron saw the fight slipping. The steam that was supposed to blind the salamander blinded his own fighters too. The creature hunted by vibration and heat. They were the ones lost. He changed the field. He shouted for silence and slammed his fist into a loose iron plate Craig had brought from the forge. The clang rang through the pit. The salamander turned toward him. Kyron struck the plate again and ran across the ash, dragging it behind him. Every step burned through the soles of his feet. The salamander followed the noise. Kyron led it away from the steam cloud and toward the old vent trench. Craig had warned that the trench was thin stone over an empty heat channel. Kyron had planned to avoid it. Now it became the only useful ground. The creature lunged. Kyron jumped aside too late. Its shoulder clipped him and threw him into a sulfur mound. Burning grit stuck to his arm. He scraped it off with a snarl, losing skin with it. The salamander climbed onto the trench. Kyron yelled once. The kobolds pulled the hook chains. Iron hooks, buried in the weakened stone, tore free. The trench roof broke under the salamander's weight. Its front half dropped into the heat channel, trapping it for 3 breaths. Not long enough to kill it. Long enough to hurt it. Borg and the orcs charged in from the flank. They drove wet hide shields against its head, forcing its jaws downward. The hides smoked and split. Borg's forearm burned through the wrappings, but he held. Mira climbed the creature's back with a knife in each hand, using scale gaps like ladder cuts. She reached the base of the neck and stabbed down. The salamander thrashed, throwing her into the ash. Kyron saw her roll and not rise at once. His chest tightened. He wanted to rush to her. He did not. The gland was exposed. Kyron took the longest hooked spear and ran straight at the creature. The salamander saw him. Fire gathered in its throat, a swelling orange light behind the scales. Borg shouted a warning. Kyron kept running. At the last moment, he dropped to his knees and slid under the first burst of flame. Heat passed over his back. His hair burned. The world became red and white. He drove the spear upward with both hands. The point punched through the gland beneath the throat. Burning fluid poured down the shaft and over his arms. His skin hissed. He almost let go. The salamander convulsed, trying to pull back, but the trench held its chest and the orcs held its head. Kyron twisted the spear. The gland ruptured. The creature's own fire filled its throat. Its next breath became a wet explosion inside its mouth. Flames burst from its eyes and neck slits. It thrashed hard enough to throw Borg aside and snapped 2 chains, then collapsed, with its claws digging into the ash. No one cheered. One kobold was dead. Another would die by morning. Mira's ribs were bruised, and Borg's arm was cooked nearly to the muscle. Kyron's hands looked like blackened meat. He still cut into the salamander's chest and ate the hot core beside its heart. Fire salamander defeated. Personal contribution confirmed. Trait selection available. The system offered flame breath, heat blood, scale resistance, and fire gland adaptation. Flame breath tempted him. It was powerful and terrifying. It was also obvious. A prince who had survived court knew the value of weapons no one saw until too late. He chose Fire Gland Adaptation. Pain struck his palms as if two burning stones had been sewn under the skin. He clenched his teeth and watched red lines spread from his wrists to his fingers. When he opened his hands, a small flame pulsed in each palm and died. The power was controlled, hidden, and useful. Kyron ordered the dead carried back. At Blackroot Hold, he stood before the gathered clans and named the fallen kobold and the goblin who died in the steam. Some monsters looked confused. Grak had never named the dead unless he wanted their bones. Kyron named them anyway. Then he said scouts west. It was time to see how close Arvenia had come. The first human scout reached the western marsh road at dawn and died before noon. Kyron did not kill him. Mira's hunters took him alive, with a snare around the ankle and a cloth full of sleep mold pressed over his mouth. The man woke tied to a root in Blackroot Hold, pale, sweating, and certain he had been dragged into a story used to frighten children. He wore the gray cloak of the Border Watch. On his belt was a stamped token from Grey Watch Fort, the nearest Arvenian outpost. The fort sat where the marsh road hardened into stone, 3 days west of Blackroot. Kyron remembered it from maps. As a prince, he had once ordered repairs to that road after a flood. Now his former kingdom used it to send hunters into the Deadlands. The scout tried to say he had only been mapping monster movement. Mira wanted to cut out his tongue for lying. Kyron questioned him for an hour and listened to what fear made him reveal. Greywatch held 60 soldiers, a captain named Hadron, 12 hunters, and a cellar used for captured monsters. Once a month, a covered wagon took prisoners east. The scout did not know where they went. He only knew the seal on the wagon bore the crowned lion of King Rhaegar. The name moved through Kyron like old poison warming again. He left the scout alive in a guarded cave, with water and no weapon. Borg wanted a night assault through the front gate. Craig said the gate would hold against anything short of a troll. Mira suggested killing patrols until the fort starved. Kyron chose a faster answer because the next wagon was due in 5 nights. He studied the fort from the marsh for 2 days. Greywatch had stone walls, but its weakness was comfort. The soldiers feared monsters in the open marsh, so they burned watchfires bright and kept their eyes outward. They trusted the drainage channel that ran beneath the west wall, because no grown human could crawl through it. A kobold could. On the 3rd night, Craig led 6 kobolds through the channel with oil bladders and wire saws. Mira's scouts cut the horse lines and drove the animals toward the marsh. Borg took 20 fighters to the eastern road and made enough noise to convince the fort that a full attack was gathering there. Kyron waited in the black reeds with the main force. The first alarm came from the stables. Horses screamed, men shouted, bells rang. Archers ran to the east wall, where Borg's orcs beat shields and roared in the darkness. The captain gave orders quickly. Kyron heard discipline in the man's voice and marked him as dangerous. Then, smoke rose from the western storehouse. Craig had reached the oil. The soldiers divided. The gatehouse opened its inner door to send men toward the fire. Kyron moved. He crossed the open killing ground with 8 goblins under wet hides. Arrows came almost at once. One goblin fell with a shaft through the neck. Kyron did not stop. He raised his palms and sent 2 narrow bursts of flame into the dry brush stacked near the wall by Craig's earlier work. Fire climbed fast, throwing smoke across the archer's view. Mira's team came over the lowest corner with rope hooks. The fighting on the wall was not clean. Human soldiers were larger, better armored, and trained to hold formation. The first goblin over the parapet died on a spear. The second panicked and tried to climb back down. Mira shoved past him, ducked under a sword stroke, and stabbed a soldier behind the knee. Kyron reached the wall as a man leaned over to cut the rope. Kyron caught the man's wrist, hardened the skin of his forearm against the blade, and pulled. The soldier came screaming over the edge and vanished into the smoke below. Inside the fort, chaos spread in pockets. Kyron did not let his fighters chase. He had learned from wolves and nobles alike that pursuit ruined plans. He sent goblins to lock the barracks doors from outside. He sent kobolds to spike the armory shutters. He sent Borg to the gatehouse. Borg loved that order. The orc crashed into the gatehouse with 6 fighters behind him. Human soldiers met them on the stairs. The narrow space robbed the orcs of room. Borg took a spear through the thigh and kept climbing. He used the spear haft still stuck in his leg to pin the next soldier against the wall, then broke the man's helmet with his forehead. Kyron entered the central yard and found Captain Hadron waiting. Hadron was older than Kyron expected, with iron-gray hair and a shield scarred by years of service. He did not curse monsters or shout prayers. He advanced with 4 soldiers in tight formation, shield front, spear angles low. Kyron tested them with fire. Hadron raised his shield. A pale rune flashed across the metal, splitting the flame. The soldiers closed the gap. Kyron retreated 3 steps, not because he feared them, but because he needed to feel their rhythm. Spear, shield, spear, from the right. Hadron held center and waited for overextension. Kyron feinted left. A spear grazed his ribs. He hardened the skin there, and trapped the shaft against his body with one arm. Before the soldier could pull back, Mira's knife took him in the side. Hadron adjusted instantly. He bashed Mira away with his shield and cut at Kyron's face. The sword was not elegant, but it was precise. Kyron ducked, caught the captain's shield edge, and tried to tear it aside. Hadron stepped with the pull instead of resisting, and drove his knee into Kyron's stomach. Air left him. The second soldier stabbed for his throat. Kyron dropped, letting the spear pass over him, and released fire from his palm against the man's boot. The soldier screamed and stumbled. Kyron took the opening, slashed the tendons behind the knee, and rolled away from Hadron's sword. Hadron knew he was losing men. He stopped trying to kill Kyron and tried to delay him. Shield high, shortcuts, controlled retreat toward the cellar stair. Kyron understood at once. Hadron wanted time for someone to move or kill them. Kyron threw his knife at Hadron's face. The captain lifted his shield. Kyron used that half-second to leap onto the shield itself. His weight drove it down. Hadron was strong, but Kyron was no longer the trembling creature who had woken in mud. Stone skin hardened along his shin as he kicked the captain's sword hand. The sword fell. Hadron reached for a dagger. Kyron struck him in the temple with a closed fist and caught him before he hit the ground. He left Hadron alive. The cellar smelled of blood, straw, and old fear. There were cages, goblin children, kobolds with iron collars, a young harpy with one wing bound, 2 orc boys, too starved to stand. In the last cell, a human thief had been chained beside monsters because he had helped steal food for a captured goblin. Kyron stared at the royal seal stamped into the transfer ledger. Rygar's seal. Beside it was another mark. Archmage Dorman's laboratory authorization. The war changed shape in that cellar. Until then, Kyron had planned to grow, return, and kill the 2 people who had stolen his life. Now he saw the machinery around them. Soldiers who obeyed, mages who purchased bodies, ministers who signed routes, nobles who profited from cages. He took the ledger. At dawn, Grey Watch Fort burned its own banners under a sky full of ash. Kyron released the human prisoners who had surrendered. Hadron was given water, a horse, and a message for Arvenia. The Deadlands had a king now. The next army should bring more chains if it wanted to die holding them. The rescued harpy's name was Sela. She was young, proud, and furious enough to bite the hand that freed her. Mira nearly killed her for it. Kyron stopped her. Sela had been captured near the cliff nests north of the Deadlands. Human hunters had broken one flight bone and planned to sell her to a noble aviary. Her mother was Shara, queen of the high nests. That made her valuable and also dangerous. Kyron sent Sela home with medicine, 2 escorts, and the ledger page naming the hunter captain who sold her. 3 days later, the sky above Black Root Hold filled with shadows. Harpies landed on the ridge in a storm of feathers and talons. They had bodies shaped close to women, wings dark as storm clouds, and legs ending in hooked claws. Their leader wore silver rings braided into black hair and bone charms across her chest. Shara's eyes were sharp enough to make orcs look away. She did not thank Kyron, She asked what price he wanted for returning her daughter. Kyron told her no price. He wanted a meeting. That made her distrust him more. Harpies valued freedom above all else. They had survived by never kneeling to ground kings. Shara listened to Kyron's offer with her wings half open, ready to leave. He offered mutual warning, shared roads through the cliffs, and protection for nests from human hunters. In return, he wanted eyes in the sky. Shara said a crawling king had no right to ask the sky for service. Borg laughed at that. Kyron did not. He asked what would prove his right to speak. Shara pointed north to the broken teeth, a line of jagged cliffs where a viper wing had nested. The creature was not a true dragon, but it had venomous spines, leather wings, and a habit of stealing harpy eggs. Shara had lost 5 fighters trying to kill it. She said that if Kyron brought down the viper wing, she would listen again. Kyron accepted. The climb took half a day. Kyron took Mira, Sella, 2 harpy guides, and 4 goblins with hook ropes. Borg could not climb the cliff without tearing half of it down. Craig stayed below with nets and muttered that everyone involved had chosen a stupid death. The viper wing's nest clung to a ledge above a drop that vanished into mist. The creature was long and thin, with a triangular head, folded wings, and a tail lined with black spines. Its eyes tracked movement before any fighter reached the ledge. Kyron's first plan was to force it to leap, then catch it in weighted nets. The plan failed when one harpy guide slipped on loose stone. The viper wing struck instantly. Its tail spine pierced the harpy's shoulder. Venom darkened the flesh around the wound before she hit the ledge. The creature spread its wings and shrieked. The sound hit Kyron's bones. Goblins clutched their ears. Mira dropped to one knee. The viper wing used the moment to launch itself at Sella. Kyron threw a hook rope at its neck. The hook caught between scales, but the creature's flight dragged him off his feet. He hit the ledge stomach first and nearly slid over the edge. Mira grabbed the rope behind him. 2 goblins grabbed Mira. The viper wing beat its wings, lifting all of them inches from the stone. Kyron released one hand and fired a palm flame at the rope near the hook. The heat traveled along the metal and burned the creature's neck. It twisted in the air, slamming into the cliff wall. Kyron used the slack to rise and run along the ledge. The viper wing turned faster than expected. Its tail came like a black whip. He hardened stone skin across his forearm and blocked. The spine punched through the hardened patch and into muscle. Venom burned cold. His fingers went numb at once. Sella dove from above and raked the creature's eye. Mira struck from below, cutting the membrane of one wing with a hooked knife. The viper wing screamed and snapped at her. Kyron tore the spine from his arm, almost losing the use of the limb, and jumped. For a breath, he was in open air. Then he landed on the creature's back. The viper wing thrashed into flight, half blind and one wing torn. Kyron locked his claws under 2 scale ridges and held on as the ledge fell away below him. Wind tore at his face. The creature rolled, trying to scrape him against the cliff. The first impact crushed his shoulder against stone. The second opened his side. He could not outlast it. He crawled forward along its spine while it bucked under him. The venom in his arm made his grip unreliable. Twice he nearly fell. He used his teeth on the scale ridge when his left hand failed. At the base of the neck, the scales thinned. He drove his burning right palm against the torn eye wound Sella had opened. Flame entered soft tissue. The viper wing convulsed. Kyron almost lost his hold, but Mira's rope was still attached to the hook in its neck. From the ledge, Mira and the goblins pulled with everything they had. The creature's damaged wing folded. It fell. Kyron jumped before impact and hit a lower shelf hard enough to crack stone under his knees. The viper wing struck the rocks below and lived for several terrible seconds, dragging itself in circles with one wing and a broken spine. Kyron climbed down despite the venom. He cut open the chest and found the flight pore, a dense organ wrapped in black vessels. Viper wing defeated. Personal contribution confirmed. Trait selection available. The system offered venom spine, shriek organ, wing membranes, and air balance. He wanted the shriek. A weapon that broke formations would be useful. But the sky had denied him once, and he did not intend to keep crawling forever. He chose wing membranes. Pain opened along his back. Bone shifted, muscles split, and rewove. He did not scream, but his claws carved grooves into the stone. When it ended, folded wings lay beneath his skin like hidden knives. He could force them out, but not gracefully. His first attempt at flight ended with him falling into a thorn bush. Sella laughed, despite her wound. Shara did not laugh when he returned carrying the viper wing's head. She landed before him, touched the dead creature's brow, and then lowered her wings in the harpy sign of respect. Not submission. Respect. Kyron accepted the difference. The sky joined Blackroot Hold that evening. Rao came during the red rains. The dead land sometimes bled iron from the clouds, turning pools rust-colored and staining every roof in Blackroot Hold. On the second night of that rain, the southern watchtower collapsed under a blast of heat and force. 3 goblins died before they understood what had attacked. The creature that landed beyond the ridge was a young dragon, though young did not mean small. Raug was the length of a merchant barge, with bronze-black scales, 1 torn wing, and a spear the size of a tree trunk, lodged between 2 ribs. Human ballista work. His left eye was scarred shut. His breath came in smoke edged with sparks. He did not speak at first. He fed. A herd of marsh boars vanished. Then, 2 kobold work teams. Then, a harpy scout. Raug was wounded, starving, and strong enough to make every clan in Blackroot Hold remember what true monsters looked like. Borg wanted to evacuate the ridge. Shara wanted to attack from above, and lost 3 feathers from anger when Kyron refused. Craig said the old ravine south of the forge vents might hold the dragon if they collapsed both ends, but no sane creature would step into it willingly. Kyron studied Raug from a distance for 2 days. The dragon favored his left side. He could breathe fire, but only in short bursts. His torn wing made flight clumsy. He was still too powerful for open battle. Kyron could not simply become stronger by wanting it. Every trait he owned had been earned against creatures that could kill him. Raug could kill the hold. So Kyron made the hold into a weapon. Craig carved release points into the ravine walls. Kobolds buried chain anchors under mud. Harpies carried clay jars filled with cold mineral slurry to the upper ledges. Goblins placed bone spikes beneath loose soil. Borg and the orcs built a false barricade at the ravine mouth, something strong enough to look like a desperate defense and weak enough to break on command. The bait was meat, smoke, and insult. Kyron stood at the ravine entrance with the viper wing head mounted on a pole and shouted in the harsh monster tongue that Raug had come to the Deadlands because humans had thrown him away, half dead. The dragon understood enough. Raug charged. The ground shook under him. Fire gathered in his throat. Kyron waited until the heat touched his face, then leaped sideways and unfurled his wings. He did not fly well. He used the wings to throw himself farther than a leap should carry. Fire washed over the false barricade and turned it to burning splinters. Raug entered the ravine. The first collapse fell behind him, sealing the exit. The dragon did not panic. He slammed his body into the wall, breaking half the stonefall with raw strength. Kyron saw at once that the trap would not hold long. He gave the signal. Harpies dropped cold jars onto the spear lodged in Raug's ribs. The mineral slurry burst across hot metal and scale. Steam exploded. Raug roared and twisted, exposing the wound. Goblins rushed from side cuts and threw hooked chains at the spear shaft. 2 died in one sweep of the dragon's tail. Borg led the orcs in next. They did not try to pierce the dragon's scales. They hooked chains around the spear and pulled. Raug snapped at them. 1 orc vanished between his jaws. Borg kept pulling, with blood running down his face from flying stone. The spear shifted. Raug screamed. Kyron attacked the blind side. He used wings for short bursts, landing on rock shelves and launching again. Fire from his palms did little to dragon scale, but he aimed for the wound, not the armor. Each burst made the spear metal glow hotter. Raoul learned. He stopped chasing the orcs and waited for Kyron's next leap. When Kyron came in low, the dragon's head moved with terrible speed. The jaws caught his left wing. Pain tore through his back. The wing membrane shredded. Raoul shook him and threw him into the ravine wall. Kyron's body hit stone and dropped. He could not breathe. His left wing hung useless, half torn from the muscle. The dragon turned toward him, smoke pouring from his mouth. For the first time since Grak, Kyron felt the clean edge of helplessness. Then Mira ran into the ravine. She was too small to hurt Raoul. She carried no spear, only a coil of chain and a clay jar. She ran straight across the dragon's good eye line, making herself impossible to ignore. Raoul turned his head. Mira threw the jar into his open mouth. Cold mineral slurry burst across the back of the throat. The dragon's fire choked into steam. It would not kill him. It bought 3 breaths. Kyron used them. He forced his legs under him, grabbed one of the buried chain anchors, and wrapped the chain around his own arm. Stone skin hardened along his shoulder and back. Borg understood. He shouted, and the orcs pulled the main chain tied to the spear. Kyron pulled from the opposite angle. The spear tore sideways through Raug's wound. The dragon's chest opened enough for blood to pour in a smoking sheet. Raug thrashed, breaking anchors, crushing goblins, splitting the ravine floor. Kyron was dragged across stone, his arm nearly dislocated, but he held until the spear ripped free. Raug tried to fly. Shara and the harpies hit his torn wing from above, not with strength, but with precision. They cut the damaged tendons Kyron had marked. The wing collapsed. Raug fell chest first onto the bone spikes beneath the mud. Most snapped. 3 entered the open wound. The dragon still lived. Kyron climbed onto his neck, with one working arm and a torn wing dragging behind him. Raug rolled, trying to crush him. Kyron wedged himself behind a horn ridge and struck the scarred eye with both palms. Fire entered the old wound. Raug's roar shook loose stone from the ravine walls. Kyron drove his claws under the eye socket and pulled until the skull gave him a path. It was brutal, slow work. Raug's body bucked under him. Twice, Kyron nearly lost his grip. At last, his hand found the pulsing heat behind the skull. He tore. Raug died with his claws buried in the ravine floor. The silence afterward was not victory. It was the sound of survivors counting the missing. Kyron ate from the dragon heart, while blood steamed around his knees. Young Dragon Raug defeated. Personal contribution confirmed. Trait selection available. The system offered Dragon Flame, Scale Mantle, Wing Restoration, Magic-Resistant Blood, and Dominance Aura. Kyron wanted all of them. His body could not hold all of them. The warning appeared before desire made him foolish. Current vessel near threshold. Select inheritance path with highest compatibility. He chose magic-resistant blood. The pain was deeper than any evolution before it. His bones heated from within. His skin tightened. His torn wing pulled itself half closed, but did not fully heal. Black lines spread across his chest and arms, thin as ink and alive under the skin. His eyes burned until the world sharpened in gold. Then the system named a new form. Current race. High Hobgoblin Sovereign. Trait integration advanced. Suppression of external traits unlocked. Kyron stood slowly. His body had changed. He was taller, nearly human height and more. His shoulders had narrowed from the brute bulk of earlier forms into something lean and controlled. His skin had deepened to dark jade green. His hair, once black and ragged, had turned pale silver white. His eyes were gold, slit like a dragon's. The torn wing folded beneath his back and vanished under the skin with a wet pull of muscle. Mira stared at him, as if she did not know whether to bow or check if he was dying. Kyron looked at his hands. They were almost human in shape, except for the claws that slid out when he flexed. He thought of the palace mirrors. He wondered whether Eliana would recognize him. Then he turned from that thought and ordered the dead carried home. Craig named the kingdom by accident. He was arguing over grain stores with 3 goblin hunters, 2 orcs, and a harpy who insisted that air scouts deserved first choice of dried meat because they saw danger before anyone else. Craig waved a slate covered in marks and said that if everyone wanted shares, then someone had to decide whether Blackroot was a den, a hold, or a nation. The word nation made the cavern quiet. Kyron was standing near the forge, watching molten iron pour into spear molds. He looked at the gathered faces. Goblin, kobold, orc, harpy, troll. Each had come for survival. None had come because they believed monsters could share law. He asked Craig what old maps called the Deadlands before humans cursed the name. Craig scratched his neck and said the oldest kobold tunnel stones used a word close to Noctarion. It meant night shelter, or place beneath dark roots. The meaning was not exact. Kobold words changed when spoken above ground. Kyron accepted it. Noctarion. The coronation was not like the ceremonies of Arvenia. There were no polished floors, no choirs, no silk banners. The crown was made from black iron, dragon scale, the jawbone of the viper wing, and 1 tooth from Grak's skull. Shara gave 3 dark feathers. Borg added a broken orc tusk. Craig set a small polished ore lens at the center. Mira tied it together with braided sinew from the bone wolf pack. Kyron did not sit. He stood before the clans in the Great Root Cavern, wearing a cloak stitched from viper wing hide and salamander scale patches. His wings were hidden. His claws were hidden. The fire in his palms was hidden. That made him look more dangerous, not less. The monsters knew what had been folded away inside him. Olma, the old troll shaman who had joined after the cave wars, marked his brow with ash and red rainwater. She called him king in the tongue of stone people. Shara called him sky ally. Borg called him war chief. Craig called him sovereign because it sounded official and because he had found it in an old human ledger. Mira said nothing at first. Then she stepped forward and placed Grak's iron hatchet at his feet. Her voice carried through the cavern as she said Thornden had ended the night. Kyron made law stronger than hunger. Some awkwardly, some with pride wounded, some with relief. Kyron looked over them and felt the weight settle, heavier than any crown. He had not wanted a people when he woke in the mud. He had wanted a road back to the woman with the poisoned cup. But the road had filled with faces, and each face now had a claim on his choices. He spoke little. He told them Noctarion would not be a pit where the strong fed on the weak. It would be a blade pointed at anyone who came with chains. Those who worked would eat. Those who betrayed their own would face judgment. Those who served under the crown would be protected by the crown. The cheering began with goblins and became something larger. 3 weeks later, the hero came. Siren Aster rode under a white banner with 30 knights, 40 soldiers, 2 priests, and a wagon carrying holy lamps. He was younger than Kyron expected. Perhaps the age Kyron had been when he died. He wore white gold armor and carried a sword that glowed faintly, even under clouded daylight. He asked for parley at the broken stones west of the marsh. Kyron went with Mira, Borg, Shara, and 6 guards. Siren looked at him with controlled disgust. Not personal hatred. Training. Doctrine. The gaze of a man taught since childhood that monsters were suffering given teeth. Siren said the kingdom of Arvenia demanded the release of all human captives and the surrender of the creature calling itself king. Kyron told him there were no human captives in chains. There were only prisoners taken in battle and traitors awaiting judgment for trafficking children. Siren did not believe him. He said monsters lied by nature. Kyron almost laughed. He had heard better lies from people wearing perfume. The parley ended badly. Siren gave 1 day for surrender. Kyron used the day to move civilians deeper into the ridge and prepare the marsh approaches. He had defeated soldiers before. He had killed a dragon. He thought he understood danger. He did not understand holy magic until it touched him. At dawn, Arvenian priests planted silver stakes along the marsh road. The stakes did not attack. They changed the ground. Hiding places opened. Goblin scouts found their shadows burning under the white light of the holy lamps. Kyron ordered the first ambush anyway. It began well. Harpies dropped stones on the rear line. Kobolds opened sink pits. Orcs hit the soldiers as they tried to form ranks. Kyron struck from the side and tore through 3 shields with claws and palm fire. Then, Siren entered the fight. His sword cut through Borg's axe haft and burned the orc's chest without touching skin. He moved with trained economy, not wasting steps, not chasing panic. When Kyron attacked, Siren met him blade to claw. The first contact sent pain up Kyron's arm, like lightning poured into blood. Dragon resistance softened magic. It did not erase holy fire. Kyron switched tactics. He used wings for a sudden burst, came from above, and fired both palms at Siren's face. Siren raised his sword. Light split the flame and struck Kyron in the chest. He hit the ground smoking. Mira tried to reach him and took a holy bolt through her cloak. Shara pulled her away before the second bolt landed. Borg roared and charged Siren. Siren stepped aside and cut the back of Borg's leg, dropping him without killing him. The hero was not cruel. That almost made him worse. Kyron rose, chest burned open, and forced his body forward. He feinted with claws, hid the tail spike he had taken from lesser prey months before, and struck for Siren's ankle. The tail hit a shield of light and rebounded hard enough to split its own flesh. Siren pressed him then. Sword cut, shield of light, step, cut again. Kyron gave ground. Each blocked strike burned, each dodge came slower. He tried to draw Siren toward a sink pit, but the priest saw the ground shift and warned him. Kyron had built the battlefield. Siren's holy light had revealed it. The turning point came when a priest raised a lamp toward the civilian tunnel entrance. Goblin children hiding inside began to scream as the light seared their skin. Kyron abandoned the duel. He threw himself between the lamp and the tunnel. The holy beam struck his back. His knees hit mud. For a moment, every hidden trait in his body tried to unfold in panic. Wings, claws, fire, scales. He forced them down and shouted the retreat order. Noctarian withdrew under smoke from Craig's vents and harpy cover. Siren held the field. The hero could have pursued. He stood among burned mud and wounded monsters, watching Kyron carried back into fog. That night, Kyron lay on stone, while Ulma and the healers scraped holy burns clean. The wounds resisted troll salves. Dragon blood slowed the damage, but did not close it. Borg, limping badly, said they should gather every fighter and crush the hero by weight. Kyron turned his head and looked at the maps scratched into slate. No, he had fought Siren as a monster, on a battlefield chosen by humans. From now on, he would fight as a prince. The next month, Kyron did not seek Siren. He sought wagons. Arvenian armies ate more than they bled. Every soldier on the border needed bread, salt, arrows, lamp oil, horseshoes, bandages, and orders. Kyron had grown up watching supply clerks bore generals to death with numbers. As a prince, he had once hated those meetings. As a monster king, he blessed every dull hour he had survived in them. He drew the western roads on slate. Grey Watch had fallen, but 2 forts remained fed by the King's Road. A smaller forest road carried holy lamp oil from church storehouses. River barges brought grain to the border mills. None of those routes were heroic. All of them mattered. Kyron divided the war into hunger. Shara's harpies watched from cloud cover and marked every convoy. Mira's scouts cut harness straps at night and left horses loose in the marsh. Craig's kobolds dug shallow traps that broke wagon wheels rather than swallowed men. Borg's orcs struck only when soldiers left formation to repair damage. The first convoy burned by accident. A young goblin panicked when a guard spotted him and threw a firepot too early. The flames caught the rear wagon, then the dry canvas, then the arrows inside. The explosion killed 2 goblins and 5 human drivers, who had not even drawn weapons. Kyron arrived after the fight and found Mira standing over the bodies, jaw tight. The young goblin expected praise because the convoy was gone. Kyron did not give it. He made the scouts rebuild the scene from footprints and ash. He showed them where the guard had been looking, where the fire pot should have gone, how the drivers might have been spared and the grain taken. Then he ordered the dead humans buried away from the road. Some monsters did not understand. Humans never buried their dead. Kyron answered that Noctarian would not learn its laws from its enemies. At the salt mine of Eschen Ford, Kyron did not attack the mine. He bribed the overseer's abused laborers with food and safe passage, then had Craig collapse the storage tunnel after the salt had been removed. The army lost its preserved meat within 2 weeks. At the Chapel Road, harpies dropped stones before and behind a lamp oil wagon, trapping it in a ravine. Kyron took the oil and left the priests alive with a written record of the monster children found in Greywatch. The priests burned the paper, but one novice hid a page in his boot. At a manor belonging to Lord Varnus, Kyron struck harder. Varnus owned the hunting rights along the Deadlands border. His private cages held monsters too weak to sell east. Kyron entered at night through the old irrigation channel, a path Craig found in tax maps taken from Greywatch. Mira cut the kennel dogs loose and fed them drugged meat. Borg broke the inner gate when silence failed. The manor guards were not soldiers. They fought like men paid to frighten peasants and beat prisoners. That made them dangerous in a different way. They panicked early, swung wildly, and set fire to their own stable when a lantern fell. Kyron found Varnus's nephew, Kale, in the trophy hall, holding a blessed dagger to the throat of a caged goblin child. Kale was young, polished, and shaking. He said the Monster King would let him leave or watch the child die. Kyron did not rush. He studied the room, hunting spears on the wall, a chandelier above, polished floor, Kale's right hand tight, left foot back, weight poorly set. A spoiled noble trained by instructors, not danger. Kyron spoke softly enough that Kale had to listen. He told the young man that fear made fingers stiff, and stiff fingers cut slower than they threatened. Kale pressed the blade harder. A line of blood appeared on the child's throat. Mira moved behind the trophy curtain, but Kale saw the cloth shift and jerked back. The mistake nearly killed the child. Kyron used the moment to strike the chandelier chain with palm fire. The chain snapped. Kale flinched upward. Kyron crossed the room in that half second. The dagger cut the child's skin, but not deep. Kyron caught Kale's wrist and crushed it until the dagger fell. He did not kill him in front of the child. He threw him against the wall and ordered him bound. The manor burned by dawn. The rescued prisoners left with Noctarian. Kale was sent back to Arvenia, with the ledgers of his own house nailed to a wooden board, alive and humiliated. The story spread faster than armies. At first, humans called Kyron the Marsh Beast, then the Green Tyrant, then the Returned Prince, whispered only behind doors. Rygar punished that last rumor with prison. Punishment made it travel faster. Siren heard the rumors too. He rode the roads Kyron had broken and saw wagons burned, but drivers spared. He saw chapels left standing, cages opened, and noble hunting lodges emptied. He fought Noctarian scouts twice. Both times they retreated when civilians came near. The shape of the enemy did not match the sermons. One evening, near the ruins of an old watch shrine, an elderly knight requested parley under a torn blue cloak. Mira almost shot him. Kyron recognized the way the man held himself before he recognized his face. Captain Leor. Once, Leor had commanded Kyron's personal guard. He had taught the prince to grip a sword until the wrist, not the fingers, carried the weight. He looked older now, thinner, with a beard gone white and a limp he had not owned before. Leor did not know Kyron at first. He saw a green king with gold eyes and kept his hand near his sword. Then Kyron repeated a lesson Leor had given him on a rainy training day years before. A dead man cannot defend his pride, so defend your ribs instead. Leor went still. Kyron took from his pouch the royal signet ring that Eliana had removed from his finger before he died. He had recovered it from a shrine wagon months earlier, where Rygar had sent old relics for melting. He held it out. Leor's face broke before his knees bent. He told Kyron that some of the old guard had suspected poison. But Rygar moved too quickly. Witnesses vanished. Servants were replaced. The physicians who examined the body died of fever within the month. Lior had been sent to a remote post and stripped of command. Kyron asked whether he wanted forgiveness for surviving. Lior said no. He wanted a chance to open the right gate when the time came. Kyron accepted. The War of Roads continued, and now it had a door into the capital. Siren found the message tied to the hilt of his practice sword. That alone disturbed him. The sword had been inside his tent, within a camp watched by knights, priests, and holy lamps. Whoever had entered could have killed him in his sleep. Instead, the message asked him to come alone to the abandoned mill at Stonebrook. It bore the green crown mark. Siren knew he should burn it. He went anyway. Kyron waited in the mill, with no guards visible. That did not mean he was alone. Siren felt eyes in the rafters, under the floor, beyond the broken windows. The Monster King stood near the old grinding stone, with his claws hidden and his wings folded away under skin. Siren kept his sword drawn. Kyron did not ask for trust. He asked for 1 hour. Siren said, monsters always ask for time when cornered. Kyron answered that men with clean banners often needed darkness to do their work. The words angered Siren, but anger did not erase curiosity. He followed Kyron through the mill cellar into a smuggler tunnel that led beneath the river road. After a quarter hour of walking, they reached a sealed iron door marked with Archmage Dorman's sigil. Siren recognized the sigil. The crown had told him Dorman ran research on monster resistance, necessary work for protecting the realm. Kyron gave him the key taken from Varnus's manor and stepped aside. Siren opened the door himself. The smell hit first. Not battlefield blood, not rot from a bad wound. It was the sour, chemical stink of bodies kept alive past mercy. Rows of tables filled the first chamber. Chains hung from ceiling rails. Jars of organs floated in yellow liquid. Slate boards listed race, age, trait, pain response, and extraction result. Siren's sword lowered an inch. A mage in Dorman's blue robes came around the far corner, carrying a tray of glass needles. He froze when he saw Siren. Then he saw Kyron and reached for an alarm bell. Kyron moved, but Siren moved faster. The hero struck the bell rope from the mage's hand with the flat of his blade. He demanded an explanation in the name of the crown. The mage stammered that this was authorized. He said the subjects were monsters, criminals, and failed stock. He said their suffering had produced holy lamp improvements and weapon oils that saved human lives. Siren's face drained of color. Then the inner doors opened. Dorman had prepared for intrusion. 3 flesh constructs lumbered out, stitched from troll muscle, bare bone, and metal braces. Their heads were covered by iron masks. They felt no pain because pain had been cut out of them. Kyron and Siren fought side by side without agreeing to. The first construct charged Siren. Holy light cut into its chest, but the troll muscle closed around the wound. Siren adjusted, slicing joints instead of mass. Kyron took the second construct low, using fire to heat the metal brace on its knee. Before Borg's training answered in his body, he kicked the weakened joint sideways. The construct fell, but its arm caught him across the ribs and threw him into a table. Glass shattered under his back. The third construct went for the cages in the side chamber. It had orders to kill evidence. Siren saw it and shouted. Kyron could not reach it in time on foot. His injured wing had healed enough to unfold, but the chamber was narrow. He forced only one wing out, slammed it against the floor, and used the burst to launch himself over the operating tables. He hit the construct from behind and wrapped both arms around its neck. It did not need to breathe. That was a mistake. The construct reached back, caught his shoulder, and began to pull him over its head. Kyron dug claws into the iron mask. It held. Siren arrived and drove his light blade through the creature's elbow joint. The arm fell loose. Kyron used the opening to press both palms against the back of the mask. Fire filled the metal. The flesh inside cooked. The construct staggered and collapsed. The fight left the laboratory burning in 3 places. Siren cut open the cages himself. Inside were monsters. Yes, goblins, kobolds, a young troll whose legs had been removed for regeneration trials. There were also humans, prisoners whose families could not pay fines, a deserter, a girl with a birthmark Dorman thought might react to monster blood. Siren stood before them and did not speak. Kyron did not comfort him. He had not brought Siren here for comfort. Dorman was not present. Among them was a page authorizing transfer of live material to the capital, under Rygar's seal and Eliana's countersignature. The queen had known, or at least she had signed papers that required her not to care. Siren folded the page with careful hands. Outside the laboratory, dawn showed pale over the river. Kyron asked whether the hero would still stand between Noctarian and the throne. Siren did not answer quickly. He looked at the freed prisoners, at the smoke, at his own glowing sword. Then he said he would not serve a lie. But he would not become Kyron's soldier either. Kyron accepted that. A hero who stepped aside at the right moment could change a war as much as one who joined it. Siren rode back to his camp and ordered his knights to withdraw from royal command until the laboratory was investigated. Half obeyed, half reported him as compromised. By sunset, Rygar had declared Siren deceived by monster sorcery. By midnight, copies of Dorman's notes were moving through Arvenia in harpy claws and human hands. The border broke at 3 points. It guarded the river bend where grain barges crossed into the western road. Kyron did not storm the walls. He sent kobolds upriver to loosen the old mill dam, while harpies harried the watchtowers. When the dam broke, floodwaters slammed into the river gate and filled the lower yard. Soldiers ran to save supplies. Mira's scouts entered through the water tunnels and opened the sallyport. The fight inside was harder than planned. Stoneford's commander had drilled his men for inner defense. They abandoned the flooded yard and formed shield walls on the stair landings. Goblins could not break them. Orcs could not climb under arrow fire. Kyron entered through the port and saw 3 failed charges in the first 5 minutes. He stopped the 4th. Instead of throwing bodies up the stairs, he ordered Craig to open the grain dust stores. Fine flour filled the lower hall. Then, Kyron sent a thin line of palm fire across the floor and pulled everyone behind the stone corner. The dust flash did not explode the fort apart. It did what he needed. Heat and pressure knocked the shield wall loose, blinded the front rank, and filled the stairwell with choking smoke. Borg's orcs hit before the soldiers recovered. Stoneford surrendered by afternoon. Red Hill nearly became a disaster. The fort held families of local officers inside its chapel, not as prisoners in name, but as protection against monster attack. Rygar's order had been clear. If the fort seemed likely to fall, the commander was to kill hostages and blame Noctarian. Kyron learned this from Leor 2 hours before the assault. A direct attack would trigger the massacre. Waiting would allow reinforcements to arrive. Kyron used Eliana against them. Leor still knew the old royal cipher used for court invitations. Craig copied the Queen's seal from captured papers. The forged message ordered the commander to move the noble families to the inner West Hall for evacuation through a hidden path. The hidden path existed. Leor had shown it on old maps. The commander obeyed because the seal was correct, and because men trained to serve crowns often feared signatures more than danger. Mira's team waited in the hidden passage. They seized the hostages, gagged them, and moved them out before the fort knew anything had changed. Then, Kyron attacked. The commander realized the deception and fought like a cornered wolf. He set oil along the inner yard and lit it while his own wounded were still there. Flames divided the fort. Harpies could not land. Orcs could not cross. Kyron entered alone through the burning yard, stone skin hardening over his feet and shins until the pain became a distant roar. The commander met him at the chapel steps with a blessed spear. Unlike Hadron, he hated monsters enough to enjoy dying if it took one with him. His first thrust caught Kyron below the ribs and burned inside the wound. Kyron grabbed the spear shaft. The holy metal scorched his palm. The commander twisted, widening the wound. Kyron headbutted him, but the helmet took most of it. The spear pushed deeper. He could have released his wings and overwhelmed the man. The chapel doorway was too narrow. The wing would snag, and the commander knew it. Kyron used the fire instead, not on the man, but on the oil behind him. The commander's own flames surged higher. Heat struck his back. He flinched forward. Kyron used that inch, snapped the spear shaft with stone-hardened fingers, and drove the broken butt into the man's throat. Red Hill fell with half its roof burning. Ashgate was waiting for him. Archmage Dorman had sent constructs, holy oil launchers, and soldiers wearing masks soaked in anti-monster fumes. The fort stood on black rock above a narrow pass. No water tunnels, no hidden royal paths, no easy sabotage. Kyron lost the first day. Every approach was covered. Harpies were driven away by net bolts. Goblin scouts died in fumes. Orcs who reached the wall found the stones coated in burning oil that clung to skin. Constructs held the gate from inside and did not tire. At dusk, Kyron called retreat. Borg argued until Kyron showed him the casualty marks on Craig's slate. Another day of pride would break the army before the capital was even in sight. They changed the problem. Ashgate could not be taken by climbing. It had to be made to open. Mira entered that night through the refuse chute, alone except for one kobold small enough to fit behind her. The chute was lined with broken glass and alchemical lime. She wrapped herself in wet leather and still came out bleeding. Inside, she did not go for the gate. Too obvious. She went for the fumes. Dorman's anti-monster barrels were stored beneath the east tower. Mira and the kobold replaced 3 vent stones, turning the fumes inward. At dawn, when the fort released the gas for the second day's defense, half the east tower choked on its own weapon. Kyron attacked the west wall at the same time, making the commander think the east failure was accidental. The constructs moved to the west. Craig's sappers, hidden under wet hides and ash, reached the east tower base and set charges made from salamander oil and lamp fuel. The blast did not destroy the tower. It cracked it. Shara's harpies dropped stones into the cracks until the tower face peeled away. Kyron entered through the wound. Inside, Dorman's senior apprentice commanded the constructs with a crystal rod. Kyron saw it after losing 2 fighters to a stitched brute that kept rising. He did not attack the construct. He threw his hidden tailspike through the apprentice's wrist. The rod fell. Craig, who had somehow followed the assault, despite every order to stay back, smashed it with a hammer. The constructs shuddered and slowed. Ashgate fell near nightfall. In the lower chamber, they found Archmage Dorman himself, not fighting, but packing notes into fireproof cases. He looked annoyed to be interrupted. Borg wanted to tear him apart. Mira wanted to feed him to the children he had caged. Kyron wanted both. He did neither. Dorman knew routes, names, storage houses, and weaknesses in the capital laboratories. Dead, he was satisfaction. Alive, he was a key. Kyron had him chained in dragon iron and sent east under guard. The road to Arvenia's heart opened. Eliana had learned to sleep lightly. Queens were watched more closely than prisoners. Servants noticed the cup left unfinished, the candle burned too low, the ink stain on a finger after midnight. Rygar noticed moods he could use and ignored fears that bored him. Lord Varnus noticed everything and filed it away for later. For 9 years, Eliana had lived inside the victory she had wanted. The palace called her beautiful. The court called her wise. The people saw her in white silk at festivals and believed grief had made her graceful. Every year, on the anniversary of Chiron's death, she placed lilies beneath his memorial statue and lowered her eyes at the correct moment. She never touched wine on that day. The first rumor of the Green King reached her as a joke. A monster wearing a crown, a goblin who built roads, a beast who sent letters. Rygar laughed in council and ordered more troops west. Then the ledgers from Grey Watch appeared in 3 noble houses. Then Varnus's nephew returned with a crushed wrist and eyes that would not meet hers. Then a burnt priest claimed the Monster King spoke like someone raised at court. Eliana sent for old records, and found that the relic wagon carrying Kyron's signet had never reached the mint. She asked quietly, too quietly. Varnus heard of it within an hour. That night, Rygar came to her chambers drunk and angry. He told her to stop chasing ghosts. Kyron was dead. Rygar had watched him die. She had watched him die too. He reminded her of that with a smile meant to wound. Eliana said she remembered. She remembered the weight of the cup. The way Kyron's fingers had twitched against the stone. The sound his breath made when the poison reached his lungs. She remembered taking the ring because Rygar's hand had shaken and hers had not. When the capital bells rang before dawn, she thought for one foolish moment that the memory itself had made the sound. Then Kyron's voice rolled over Arvenia. Not from one throat, from dozens. Harpies had dropped echo stones onto towers through the night. Devices Craig had built from Dorman's captured crystals and Cobalt resonance craft. At sunrise, they carried Kyron's recorded words across markets, barracks, shrines, and noble squares. He named himself Kyron Arvelt, murdered Prince of Arvenia, and King of Nocterion. He named Eliana Vare and Rhaegar Arvelt as his killers. He named the forts, the cages, the laboratories, and the signatures that had fed them. He did not ask the people to love him. He told them to choose whether they would die protecting the lie that had eaten them for 9 years. Panic spread faster than flame. Rygar ordered the echo stones destroyed. Soldiers climbed towers. Some threw stones down, others listened too long. In the lower city, old men who remembered Prince Kyron began saying the voice sounded wrong and right at the same time. In the barracks, Lior's old contacts moved among captains with copies of Dorman's notes. By noon, the western gates were shut. By evening, the farms outside the capital were burning, not from Nocterian fire, but from royal soldiers clearing sightlines. Refugees crowded the roads. Kyron ordered his army not to strike them. He used them instead. Food, water, and proof traveled into the city with the displaced. A mother whose son had been taken for tax debt carried a page from Dorman's register showing human subjects. A former border soldier told anyone who would listen that monsters had spared him when his own captain planned to burn civilians. Fear began to split into questions. The siege began at midnight. Kyron did not bring ladders to the main wall. He brought darkness. Craig's kobolds opened old drainage channels beneath the north quarter, routes Lior had marked from memory. Smoke from wet marsh moss seeped into the outer guard rooms. It did not kill. It made eyes water and throats close. At the same time, Shara's harpies cut the signal ropes between towers. The first gate did not fall. It opened. Lior's men seized the north mechanism after a brief fight with loyalists. One young guard tried to ring the alarm bell. Lior struck him down with the flat of his sword and told him to wake as a wiser man. Then Borg came through. Street fighting punished every mistake. The capital was not a battlefield Kyron could shape with pits and marsh fog. It was alleys, stairs, shuttered windows, rooftops, and frightened people hiding behind thin doors. Royal soldiers used crossbows from balconies. Priests cast light from shrine steps. Noctarian fighters, used to open ground and caves, bled in tight streets. Kyron moved where the pressure was worst. At Tanner's Row, a squad of royal spearmen pinned goblins against a wall and advanced with shields locked. Kyron came over the roof, wings opening for one controlled drop. He landed behind the formation and struck the rear 2 men down with the flat of his claws, not killing, only breaking armor and breath. The spearmen turned, and Mira's scouts escaped the wall. At the old grain market, a holy lamp burned so bright that orcs could not cross the square. Siren arrived before Kyron did. He did not raise his sword against the monsters. He walked to the lamp, faced the priest guarding it, and ordered him to put it out until civilians were clear. Siren cut the lampstand in half. That act traveled through the city faster than any speech. Near the palace road, Rygar's household cavalry charged. Heavy horses, armored riders, lances leveled. In open field, They might have broken the monster line. In the city, Kyron turned the street against them. Kobolds spilled oil from upper windows. Not fire oil, slick kitchen oil, taken from captured stores. Horses lost footing on stone. The first rank collapsed. Borg's orcs hit the riders as they struggled up, dragging them from saddles and disarming them before fury could become slaughter. Kyron wanted the palace intact enough for judgment. By dawn, the outer city was lost to Rygar. The palace gates closed behind the last loyal guards. Eliana watched from the high window as green banners and black feather signs appeared in streets that had cheered her wedding procession. Rygar entered behind her, fully armored, pale with rage. He said the monster at the gate was not Kyron. It could not be. Even if some demon wore his voice, it would bleed like anything else. Eliana looked down at the courtyard, where the old statue of Prince Kyron had been pulled from its base by rioters. Its stone face lay cracked in the mud. She wondered which face would enter the palace. Kyron did not break the palace gate first. He entered through the servants' aqueduct beneath the east wall, the same hidden passage he had used as a boy to escape sword lessons and steal honey cakes from the kitchen. Back then, Lior had pretended not to know. Now Lior walked behind him with a drawn sword and eyes wet from memory he refused to show. Mira came with them, along with 6 goblin veterans and 2 kobolds carrying lock tools. Borg waited outside the main gate with the army. Siren held the cathedral square and kept priests from turning the final assault into a massacre. The aqueduct was narrower than Kyron remembered. Or he was larger. His shoulders scraped stone. The smell of old water and palace lime brought back memories with cruel clarity. His mother's funeral, his first council meeting. Eliana, laughing in the garden, with a hand over her mouth, so graceful that he had mistaken practice for sincerity. At the kitchen exit, an old servant saw him and dropped a tray. Lior lifted a finger for silence. The servant stared at Kyron's green skin, gold eyes, and white hair. Then she looked lower, at the signet ring tied to a cord on his wrist. She began to cry without sound and pointed toward the Hall of Shields. Rhaegar had prepared a welcome. The Hall of Shields was long, polished, and lined with the painted shields of dead Arvenian kings. Kyron had walked it 100 times as a prince. Now the floor shone with a thin coat of oil. Murder holes had been opened behind the shields. Crossbowmen waited in the upper gallery. At the far end stood Commander Mael, captain of Rhaegar's palace guard. Mael had served Kyron's father, but ambition had survived grief better than loyalty. He offered surrender in the king's name. Kyron studied the hall. Oil on floor, crossbows above, narrow side doors, shields hiding slits. Too clean. Rhaegar had expected him to charge in anger. Kyron stepped back and gave Craig's signal. The kobolds broke the water pipes in the kitchen wall. Water rushed into the Hall of Shields from behind Kyron, spreading over the oil. Not enough to remove it. Enough to ruin the even surface and make the trap unpredictable. Then Mira's scouts fired smoke arrows into the upper gallery. Crossbowmen loosed too early. Bolts struck shields, floor, and their own lower guards. Mael cursed and ordered the charge. The palace guard came in disciplined ranks. They wore heavy half-plate and carried short spears suited to indoor fighting. Kyron met them at the edge of the oil slick, not the center. He let the first spear strike his hardened forearm and slide. The second came for his knee. He jumped back, and the soldier overextended on the wet floor. Mira took that soldier's ankle. Lior engaged another, old but still precise. The hall became a place of slipping feet, smoke, and short, brutal exchanges. Kyron made mistakes. He turned toward a crossbow sound too late, and a bolt punched into his side, beneath the ribs. He tried to unfold a wing for balance, but the hall was too narrow, and the wing struck a shield display, slowing him. Mael saw it and drove forward with 3 guards. Their spears pinned Kyron's movement. One cut his thigh, one struck his shoulder. Mael came behind the pressure with a blessed sword taken from the royal armory. Pain flashed as the blade opened Kyron's chest. For a moment, the hall tilted. Kyron stopped fighting like a beast and remembered palace dance lessons. Foot placement. Weight transfer. The polished floor that had once embarrassed him before laughing nobles now gave him an answer. He stepped onto the slick oil patch deliberately, let his weight slide, and turned the motion into a low spin beneath the spear points. His hidden tail unfolded in the turn. It struck the knee of the guard on Male's left. The man fell. Kyron rose inside the gap and pressed one burning palm against Male's sword hand. The commander held on longer than most. Skin burned, metal heated, his face twisted, but he tried to cut anyway. Lior disarmed the second guard. Mira hamstrung the third. Kyron broke Male's wrist and took the blessed sword from him. He did not kill him. Lior did. The old captain stepped forward and put his blade through Male's heart, not in rage, but as sentence for betraying the line he had sworn to defend. The palace gate opened minutes later. Borg entered with the army, but Kyron was already moving toward the throne hall. The doors were carved with lions. He had once stood before them, nervous about asking his father to let him inspect the western villages. He had once believed thrones were heavy because responsibility made them so. Rhaegar had taught him that stolen thrones were heavy because they needed corpses beneath them. Inside, Rhaegar waited in royal armor. The throne hall had been cleared of courtiers. Only Eliana stood near the balcony doors, white-faced and silent. Rhaegar held a blue-edged sword that hummed with alchemical light. Dorman's work. Kyron could smell monster cores burned into the blade. Rhaegar called him an animal wearing a dead man's name. Kyron walked forward and answered that Rhaegar had always needed better men dead before he could feel tall. Rhaegar attacked first. He was stronger than memory. 9 years of war had not left him soft. The alchemical sword cut through stone skin and left freezing fire in its wake. Kyron blocked once with the stolen blessed sword and felt the blade crack. He threw it aside before it shattered in his hand. Rhaegar pressed hard, using the royal sword style Kyron knew from youth. High cut, shield step, though he carried no shield. Thrust to the lower ribs, turn, rising cut. Kyron knew the pattern, but Rhaegar knew that he knew. He broke rhythm midway and slashed for Kyron's eyes. The cut opened Kyron's brow. Blood ran into one gold eye. Kyron retreated across the hall. Rhaegar smiled and followed. The blue sword hissed each time it passed mere Kyron's skin. Dorman had built it to punish monster flesh. One clean thrust to the heart might kill him, despite every evolution. Kyron used fire. Rhaegar's sword absorbed much of it, blue light flaring brighter. He used claws. Rhaegar's armor turned them aside. He unfolded wings for a sudden lift, but Rhaegar cut the air where his body would rise and forced him down. Rhaegar had prepared for the monster, but he had not prepared for the prince. Kyron began yielding round in a familiar curve, the old training circle marked in pale stone beneath the throne carpet. Rhaegar did not notice. His eyes were fixed on blood and victory. Kyron let his left side appear weak from the bolt wound. Rhaegar aimed there twice, each cut deeper than Kyron liked. On the third, Kyron did not dodge. He hardened stone skin under the wound, accepted the blade into flesh, and clamped his ribs around the flat before it could pull free. Pain nearly broke his focus. The sword burned inside him. Rhaegar shoved harder, thinking he had won. Kyron stepped closer. His hidden tail wrapped around Rhaegar's ankle and pulled. At the same time, he drove both burning palms against the blue sword, where it entered his own body. The alchemical blade absorbed fire until it could not. Monster cores inside it cracked one by one, sharp pops under the metal. Rhaegar tried to wrench free. Kyron held the blade with his own wound and kept burning. The sword split down the center. Rhaegar released it and punched him. The blow rocked Kyron's head back. Rhaegar drew a dagger and went for the throat. Kyron caught the wrist. Rhaegar fought with desperate strength, driving Kyron backward, step by step toward the throne stairs. For one breath, they were boys again in the training yard. One chosen, one resentful, both covered in sweat and too proud to yield. Then, Kyron saw Eliana behind Rhaegar, hand over her mouth, eyes fixed on the broken sword. He remembered the cup. He twisted Rhaegar's wrist until the dagger fell. Then he broke the wrist completely. Rhaegar screamed. Kyron struck him across the face with an open hand. Not enough to kill, enough to drop him to his knees before the throne he had stolen. The hall doors opened behind them. Soldiers, monsters, old guards, and servants saw their king kneeling under the claws of the dead prince. Kyron looked at them and did not raise his voice. He said Rhaegar Arvelt would be judged by the old law for murder of the heir, unlawful seizure of the crown, trafficking of living subjects, and treason against the realm he claimed to rule. Rhaegar spat blood and called him a goblin. Kyron nodded once. Yes. Then he ordered him taken. Eliana did not run. There was nowhere in the palace she knew better than Kyron. There was no guard left who would die for her. Rhaegar had been dragged from the hall, still cursing through broken teeth, and the silence he left behind made the throne room feel larger than it was. Kyron turned to her at last. She had imagined this meeting too many times once she accepted the voice was his. In some versions, she begged. In others, she stabbed herself before he could touch her. In the worst, he looked at her as if she did not matter. The real Kyron looked tired. That frightened her more than rage. She said Rhaegar had pressed her, that the court had already chosen, that Kyron would have been swallowed by stronger nobles if he took the throne. She said she had been young. She said she had wanted to survive. The words came carefully at first, then faster, as each failed to change his face. Kyron listened. When she finished, he walked to the balcony table, where servants had placed wine that no one had touched. He lifted the cup and studied the red surface. He told her he had not died when his heart stopped. He had died when she took the ring from his finger with steady hands. Eliana's mouth trembled. She asked whether he had come to kill her. He looked from the wine to the city below. Fires still burned in a few districts. Dawn was spreading over roofs, broken towers, and streets filled with humans and monsters watching one another like enemies forced to share a narrow bridge. Death would be too clean for her. It would turn her into a tragic queen in the songs of cowards. She would not get that gift. By noon, Rhaegar was judged in the old square before nobles, soldiers, citizens, and representatives of Noctarian. The evidence was read. Lior spoke. Former prisoners spoke. Dormand, chained and pale, confirmed enough to save his own life for another day. Rhaegar shouted over them until Borg gagged him with a strip of royal cloth. The sentence was execution. Kyron did not swing the blade. He let the old law do its work through the headsman of Arvenia, the same office Rhaegar had used to kill dissenters for years. When the blade fell, the crowd did not cheer. The sound that moved through them was lower and more frightened than joy. Then Eliana was brought forward without crown, jewels, or silk. Kyron stripped her name from the royal record and placed her under Noctarian custody. She would be taken to the Deadlands, not as a queen, not as a prisoner for torment, but as a nameless worker under the same law as those she had signed away. She would eat if she worked. She would be protected if she obeyed. She would be judged if she harmed the weak. For the first time since the poisoned cup, she begged the nobles. They looked away. She begged the priests. Siren stood among them with his sword lowered and did not move. She begged Kyron, not for love, but for status, for a chamber, for any name that placed her above the creatures she had called filth. Kyron gave her none. Mira watched as guards led Eliana down from the square. She asked quietly whether leaving her alive was mercy. Kyron said it was memory. The days after victory were harder than battle. A fallen kingdom did not become just because a wicked king died. Grain stores had to be counted. Soldiers had to be disarmed or sworn under new command. Noble houses had to be searched for cages and ledgers. Monster fighters had to be restrained from revenge killings. Human mobs had to be stopped from attacking rescued goblins. Siren took command of the city watch until a mixed council could form. Lior gathered surviving old guards. Craig buried himself in tax records and declared human accounting both primitive and offensive. Kyron did not sit on the Arvenian throne. He had it removed from the hall and melted with the chains taken from Dormand's laboratories. From that metal, Craig forged gate bars for the first sanctuary district, where freed monsters and displaced humans could live under Noctarian protection. Some called it conquest. Some called it judgment. Kyron called it unfinished work. A month after the palace fell, he returned alone to the balcony, where Eliana had given him the poisoned wine. The stone had been scrubbed many times over 9 years. He could still see the place where he had fallen, not with his eyes, but with the body that had learned to remember pain as direction. He held a cup of red wine. For a long while he watched the city. Arvenia's banners were gone. Black and green standards hung beside plain white cloths, marking houses under protection. Beyond the walls, roads led west to Noctarian, to Black Root Hold, to the deadlands that had raised him from mud and hunger. Kyron poured the wine onto the balcony stones. It spread, thin, dark, and harmless beneath his feet. Then the Green King turned from the place of his death and went back to the work his enemies had left him.